The Gods of Eden, Part 3. You are listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons and monsters and serpents, to Brothers of the Serpent podcast. Coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science. Nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Edwards Plateau, it is a beautiful day here in central Texas, high atop the Edwards Plateau. It started out all misty and strange, but it became sunny and beautiful, and it's a spring day. Yep. And we are once again joined by Laura. She's in the cube with us.
Hello, hello.
What's up? She's doing her intros live. It's not live.
Yeah, that one wasn't that great. Sorry.
I thought it was fine. What are you
doing? But what I have been doing for the snake force. Not drinking milk.
So hard.
Yeah, so her intros have actually been live. Whereas before we'd do the show usually, and she'd come in afterwards and record them, you know, and then she would get a couple of takes to so that she could do it multiple times. But now it's just like, no, you have to get it right the first fucking time.
That's right.
Yeah. And I love milk, and it makes my throat kind of.
Oh, okay.
So every week since it's been going on, I'm like, I can't drink milk. I go to drink milk, I'm like, no. For the snake force.
You only need to do that like the day before. You know, maybe.
Well, yeah, maybe that's.
Like that. When we're done with the show tonight, you can slam a whole.
Yeah, just get all your dairy products in.
Dedication by that, really.
Yeah, no, it's cool.
I actually, when we're not in here, I think about my throat and milk, and there.
All right. That is dedication. But you're also listening to the show and reviewing it and listening to yourself. And That's what we do too. Like every show, we go back and listen to it and like, can I do this better? Should I not do this next time? And you always learn every time. I learn something every time.
Exactly, every time.
Yeah.
And I've listened to both parts again. I've taken notes. I have a beautiful yellow flower notebook over here loaded with notes so I could wrap my head around.
Yeah, so we can discuss your questions about the previous shows before we start the That's great. And we're also joined by the Watcher from deep beneath the secret space station in secret outer space where his AC just went out. Watcher, you stay in room temp up there in space?
Yeah, unfortunately room temp is somewhere in the mid 90s, but I mean, hey, whatever.
That's not good, bro.
It's a rare hot day in space.
Yeah, I mean, like get a geosynchronous orbit in the permanent shadow of the planet, and
go to the dark side of the moon, man.
Or figure out how to open a window. I mean, any of these things would work.
Yeah. Now we're gonna get emails. The dark side isn't always dark on the moon. It's not what it means.
The dark side of the moon is always dark, whichever side that is.
Whoever was going to write that email is not going to write it.
That's right.
That's exactly why I said all that.
Just put your hands back in your pockets.
That's right.
Or they're going to start out by saying, "You thought I wasn't going to write that."
Yeah. I was trying to preempt any emails like that. All right.
Quick question. Does the flat Earth have a flat moon?
That's a great question.
I've wondered that too. Is the sun flat? You know? What about Jupiter? Is Jupiter flat? You know, if the Earth is flat, what about the rest of all that stuff up there? Or is all that stuff just fake?
I think they were just like they're sources of light on the other side of the veil.
Yeah.
That's why they move in the sky while you're driving. They move with you.
Oh.
Yeah.
What?
Wow, I think Kyle just blew my mind.
I mean, yeah. So, like, one of the things you can do is you can put a sheet up, like a white sheet, and then turn on a light behind it somewhere. And you'll notice that if you stand still, the position of the light that kind of maybe looks like a disc of light on the sheet doesn't stay on that part of the sheet when you start moving around.
Yeah.
It actually moves with you.
It moves along the sheet with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the sun is not really a big burning ball of mass or lightning bolts out there. It's a source of light on the other side of a veil.
Right. That's right. And the stars are just little holes in the veil where the light can shine through.
So technically it's flat because it's on the veil, which is flat.
Okay. Got it. I
This physics is complicated.
totally understood all of that. Now I'm good.
Yeah. News about
Space
stuff.
Well, let's go ahead and do the Space Weather News from spaceweather.com for Wednesday. Is that right? Am I on Thursday here? Yeah, this is the Space Weather News for tomorrow. Why are you showing me tomorrow's Space
How is
Weather
that
News?
possible?
Dude,
I don't know, but it says...
It's Russ's phone.
It says...
Got some special stuff going on.
My phone is so advanced that it's showing me the Space Weather News for tomorrow.
I love it.
Anyway, this is tomorrow's Space Weather News. Lyrid meteor shower. The Lyrid meteor shower is peaking today on April 22nd. Okay, wait a minute. What is going on here?
This is weird.
As Earth passes through a stream of debris from Comet Thatcher. Meteor rates are just below 15 per hour, according to observers with the International Meteor Organization, a relatively minor shower. Despite the low rates, spaceweather.com readers have several nice Lyrid photographs, and they have them linked here. And they have another story, Starlink x Starlink. What is worse than a train of Starlink satellites cutting across an astrophoto?
Nothing.
2 trains of Starlink satellites cutting across an astrophoto.
Oh, God.
In the Czech Republic on April 19th, amateur astronomer who has a name that I definitely can't pronounce captured perhaps the first picture of 2 orthogonal Starlink trains in a single image. He says he was trying to photograph disintegrating comet Atlas, and the local night sky suffers from light pollution. And stacking of multiple exposures is necessary in order to image the comet. Unfortunately, he had not considered the trajectories of the Starlink satellites, and many of the exposures were contaminated. So there's a picture here, and you can see the starry background, but then there are all these bright white lines.
Like crochet or something.
Yeah,
somebody's knitting something on the sky.
Yes, exactly, right. There's a whole bunch of them going in one direction, and then there's a whole bunch going perpendicular to that direction and across his picture of space.
It's not natural. It was made by humans. That we're
So are those orbiting just below the veil in the flat Earth?
Yeah, we can't get up there because of the Van Allen belts.
Right.
Obviously.
So the Starlink satellites are just below the veil.
That's right, yeah.
And then they go over the sky and then they disappear below the flat Earth and then they come back around. How does
No,
it work?
because you don't actually realize how small things get when they get far away. So it appears as though they go around like past the horizon, but really the horizon is
vanishing.
so far away that it just goes out of view.
Okay. Flat Earth Physics by Kyle. All this is being explained.
I learned this on Grimerica. Go check. They have a great Flat Earth episode.
That's right. Yeah.
Darren's very not happy with it, but
Right.
it was
Yeah.
awesome. I learned so much about Flat Earth.
Okay, so this Space Weather says this is the latest illustration of a growing problem. To date, SpaceX has launched 360 Starlink satellites with more than 12,000 planned. These satellites are showing up unwelcomed in so many images of the night sky that they have an entire photo gallery now devoted to these photos. The whole situation reminds spaceweather.com reader Peter Tarr, chief science writer at the Brain and Behavior Research Foundation, of a classic science fiction. He says, for those old enough, Barden's astonishing image of the crosshatch pattern made by Starlink satellites is the coming to life of the Tholian web of the original Star Trek series. And there's a picture of the Enterprise caught in the Tholian web. Only problem is it's not the Enterprise that's caught in the web. It is Earth-based observational astronomy, he says.
Yeah, relax. Look, the technology is getting so good that you'll be able to, like, once the sky's just filled with all these Starlink satellites, you'll be able to buy a camera that has all of those satellites built in.
Yeah.
And when you do a long exposure in the sky, it just completely gets rid of them. They're not even there because it knows exactly where they are and it ignores those sources of light.
Right. Or every
It's not gonna be a problem for them.
every Starlink satellite will have cameras on them, and when you go to take pictures of space, your camera is actually on the Starlink satellite, so it's looking past all the stuff.
And and all the
come on,
all you complainers out there will just be like, oh my God, Starlink is so great.
Yeah, problem
Probably
solved.
pull some hipster stuff like I knew it was going to be great.
Oh my gosh, that's exactly how this is going.
That's right. It is. It always happens. Current conditions: solar wind speed is 425.9 kilometers per second, and the density is a very low 2.8 protons per cubic centimeter.
Wow. Well, fast traffic when there's less traffic.
That's right. Its current spotless days stretch 17. Total spotless days in 2020 is 87. So,
Right on.
yep, 77%.
Okay, I got a follow-up space story. This is from space.com, where we get some of our space.com news. Big asteroid shows itself ahead of Earth flyby on April 29th. We have nothing to fear from 1998 OR2. We've now got a good visual on the big space rock that's going to fly by Earth next week. On Saturday, April 18th, the Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico captured a radar image of the asteroid 1998 OR2, which will zoom within 3.9 million miles of our planet.
I think it's like Arecibo. Sorry.
Arecibo. Yeah, that looks right.
That's also the SETI one.
Yeah, 3.9 million miles, 6.3 million kilometers, for those of you who use this ridiculous metric system, of our planet on April 29th. For perspective, the moon orbits Earth at an average distance of about 239,000 miles, or 385,000 kilometers. So we have nothing to fear from asteroid 1998 OR2's Earth flyby on April 29th, scientists stress. The Arecibo team members have been wearing masks in the workplace to help minimize the spread of the novel coronavirus. And they apparently see a bit of themselves in the approaching space rock. What? Look at this picture of this. It's wearing a mask, Russ.
God.
Oh my god.
So yeah, the rest of this, yeah, they're all just like they got pictures of themselves wearing masks, looking at this asteroid that looks like it's wearing a mask.
That's pretty funny.
So
nerd jokes.
Astronomers estimate that 1998 OR2 is between 1.1 and 2.5 miles, or 1.8 to 4.1 kilometers wide. Big enough that an impact could threaten human civilization. But, to repeat, there is nothing to fear here. The asteroid will miss us by a large margin on April 29th. Indeed, you should quell any general death from above fears that may be running rampant in your head. NASA has found and tracked the vast majority of giant near-Earth asteroids, and none of them pose a threat to Earth for the foreseeable future.
Right.
Well,
Thank goodness.
Oh, that's a relief.
Yeah. Thank God the vast majority of them have been found. And maybe on another episode I will read a follow-up to this story. This is pretty cool. Oh, wait, no. This is the long one. The follow-up is a really long one. No, now I've lost it.
A follow-up to which what?
Okay, here we go. This is another story. PCGamer.com.
Oh, yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
Huh? Physicist Stephen Wolfram thinks he's on to a theory of everything and wants help simulating the universe. Physicist Stephen Wolfram thinks he's figured out a framework that unifies general relativity, quantum physics, or quantum mechanics, and everything else we know about physics. And that, when we figure out the right thing to plug into it, we'll have a model of our universe. In other words, he's working on a theory of everything. And because it's 2020, he's been live streaming his ideas on Twitch.
Oh, yeah.
Wolfram's announcement is tangential to PC gaming at best, but his ideas are fun to think about for anyone interested in computing. So what the heck? We can enjoy a tangent now and then as a tangent now and then as a treat. At the core of Wolfram's proposal is the fact that when you apply a simple set of rules to a system over and over again, very interesting things can emerge. For example, in Game of Life, created by mathematician John Horton Conway, who sadly died last week after contracting the coronavirus.
Oh,
Dang.
Wow.
well, but maybe he didn't.
Well, that's true. Man, let's not get into that. Okay. Just a few simple rules. I don't even know who this guy is, but he's a game maker.
Yeah.
Just a few simple rules about how cells on a grid can behave with the correct starting state, produce creatures that move or run any algorithm at all. Similarly, Wolfram theorizes that the structure of the universe, as well as everything in it, emerges from a simple underlying rule that's being applied again and again. He's not saying that the universe is a computer, or i.e. that it was built, but he is saying that it's computational in nature. This isn't new to his controversial thinking, but with the help of students Jonathan Gorard and Max Piskunov, he's pushed the theory further than ever before, and says he did not expect to get such good theoretical results. We produced more elegantly what I had done in the 1990s, writes Wolfram. And from tiny structureless rules out were coming space, time, relativity, gravity, and hints of quantum mechanics. In other words, the laws of physics as we know them seem to emerge from the repetition of simple rules, without those laws being coded into the simulation. The actual rules being used simply dictate how abstract relationships between abstract points change and grow. With the right rule, Wolfram and team argue that we'll have a model of our universe. The idea that there could exist some elementary computational rule that successfully reproduces the entirety of the physical universe at first seems somewhat absurd, writes Gorard. Although there does not appear to be any fundamental reason, neither in physics nor mathematics nor philosophy, to presume that such a rule could not exist. Moreover, if there is even a remote possibility that such a rule could exist, then it's slightly embarrassing for us not to be looking for it. The objective of the Wolfram Physics Project is to enact this search. That's the ultra-simplified explanation, at least. Wolfram and his colleagues have released hundreds of pages on their theory. If you're interested, start with Wolfram's introductory post, which is a link, and that was the really long one. That's actually really cool. This guy explaining the development of this whole project that he's working on, and then eventually it goes into stuff that would be really hard to get into on the podcast because it's all he's talking about these like simple rules, and it's just like you have X and Y, and then X Y can go to Y Z, and then this and that. It's like kind of be hard to follow without looking
I saw
at
the graphs.
And then he shows how when he starts repeating it, it just builds these crazy structures. If you just graph, it's such a simple graph. But if you keep repeating the rule over and over, it becomes these incredibly complex forms. And so that I don't know. I think that
is cool.
So let's go back.
That's really cool. It makes me think about what we were talking about today in the car too.
Yeah. So he says. If you're interested, you can start with Wolfram's introductory post, which is aimed at non-mathematicians, though understanding the basic ideas of general relativity and quantum field theory helps. Wolfram's ideas are interesting to me, a person who doesn't have a PhD in mathematics or physics, but as you might have guessed, Twitch streams are not the traditional avenue for theoretical discourse. Many traditional physicists will regard Wolfram's project as folly, writes Wired. That doesn't necessarily mean his ideas are wrong, but whether or not they're groundbreaking or even meaningful is yet to be determined. To be truly exciting to the physics community, I'd guess that the theory will have to predict something that can be tested, and for now, that's just a hope. Wolfram and team are hoping that amateur physicists are interested in helping, such as by running bigger simulations and creating virtual reality visualizers of universe models. If absolutely nothing else, the project will result in some pretty cool wireframe art.
Yeah. He ought to do crowdsourced computation.
Yeah, so he's set up this website, basically, and he's just opened it up like, hey, you can come in here and you can make rules. It's like, the coders are people who...
Yeah.
Because he has a specific language that he's written stuff in, like he's developed.
Yeah.
But I don't know anything about coding, so...
Yeah.
But I think people that are interested in like game making or whatever, like could go in there and mess around with like creating some rules, and then you start processing that and run a simulation of it and see what kind of crazy stuff you might come up with. So I thought that was really cool, man. And thinking about the basic idea that something that could it's just interesting to me that's I don't know, for some reason I think that we will find out eventually that fundamentally there is some simple, beautiful rule.
Yeah, complexity from simplicity.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I think crowdsourced computation is cool too. That's what it made me think of. I was like, man, he ought to set up something where, because if we're
Kind of
trying,
like SETI.
yeah, SETI at home. I used to run SETI at home and Einstein at home on my computer. Like whenever I'm not using it, those programs would automatically start up and use the processing power while I'm not using it. Because the processor's just sitting there doing nothing. Right. And so while I'm not using it, the programs will start up and I'll like SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, would like the computer has this little app that you download. Right. The app connects to SETI, downloads a block of like radio
data,
raw radio telescope data that hasn't been parsed yet because they have so much data.
I think you have to.
Yeah, and then my computer would parse it for them and then send the results back and then get another block of data and do it again, whenever I'm not using it. And Einstein at home was doing the same thing, except it was looking for pulsars.
It was probably a trick.
Could be.
Yeah, they're like, sorry, you haven't found any aliens today.
Right.
Meanwhile, they're like, yes, we got the whole model of
I
the
know, I'm
spaceship.
like, how many aliens have I actually found?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's probably true.
Yeah.
Gosh, so much of the stuff you guys say in here is probably so
Wrong.
Probably being the operative word.
I just have a really good feeling about it.
Okay, so we got some good emails here. First one here is a Patreon message from Ash. I think she upgraded her Patreon support level. She said, Bigfoot gave me $2.06 and told me to upgrade my Patreon support to the next tier. He doesn't have a wallet, so it came from his butt crack. I apologize for that. I will try to weave a wallet for him from Forest Bramble so this doesn't happen again in the future. Thanks, bros. Yeah. I mean, we'll take it because it's digital, right? The bank has to deal with the Bigfoot butt crack cash. This is a Patreon message from Les, and it just says, you guys do a great job. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, buddy.
Les. Appreciate that and the support. Kevin. So I read Kevin's emails on the last show. It was the one where he had sent me Google Maps links to look at the Blue Nile. And then I was asking him, I'm not sure exactly. So he says, Russ, you mentioned in my previous email on the latest episode. You asked for some clarity on how what you were looking at was similar to the Scablands. I hope this helps. You pretty much nailed it on the head with the huge canyon and tiny river. So the underfit river, right? The scale invariance. He said, but if you remove the farming circles, they could almost be the same place. Evidence of catastrophic flooding does seem to be a global phenomenon once you start looking. Thanks for taking the time to respond. You guys are super cool, and like others have said, you have the most compelling podcast available. Snake it easy.
Nice one.
Nice one. Yeah, and there's a couple of pictures here that he sent.
Thank you for the sweet words.
Yeah. I mean, that's cool. It is an underfit canyon for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Okay, this one's from Birch, called Crustal Bang. It says, Dear Snake Bros, hope all is well. I'm doing okay over here. So I have been considering the pole shift information. There is the evidence for the flipping of the magnetic field with the zebra stripe effect in the new material at the bottom of the ocean. This effect can explain the simple inversion of the field, but not the whole magnet. It seems as if the zebra stripe effect in the lava deposits would show up with the flipping of the field itself, but not the 180 flip of the entire globe, because flipping everything together does not invert the relationship of poles to the molecules in lava.
Agreed.
The crustal displacement idea would create that effect if the crust is included in the creation of the overall magnetic field, because that would adjust the relationship of the crust to the liquid inner Earth.
Agreed.
Yep. I am a proponent of crustal shift, but not sure of the periodicity of it. The level of cataclysm outlined in Upheaval is almost unfathomable and seems to support crustal shift. In addition, the glacial scarring in equatorial regions could have occurred under a snowball Earth scenario, but perhaps there is a stronger connection to the crustal shift idea. Snowball Earth was a long time ago. I agree with that. I'm not sure how much that snowball Earth idea is even supported anymore. The idea that the whole planet became covered in ice at some point in the distant past, that's kind of, that was something that was thought for a while, but I'm not sure if that's still in the model or not.
Yeah.
because it's kind of difficult to explain how that would happen at the
Can't cover a volcano with ice.
Right. He says, about your discussion of the Big Bang takes flack for some good reasons. Just give us one miracle and we'll explain the rest. Its shortcomings cannot be explained by material science because that would be entering the realm of the metaphysical. The new science allows a fresh attempt at understanding this. The universe exhibits holofractal qualities, meaning that the smallest part contains the whole. This is as much a miracle as the singular beginning of all things, if you ask me. All of the products of the universe are just that. They are produced by the unfolding of it, and they have a beginning. I hope you all are all doing well. I loved hearing from the mom and dad. What feels right is right. Super smart, but balanced with intuition. Snakes are the best. Birch.
Thanks, man. Yeah, so I like what he was saying about physics, like the smallest part. Yeah. So that's kind of what this
fractal. Yeah,
that's kind of what this guy's talking about too.
Yeah, there does seem to be fractal qualities to the universe.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and with the crustal shift thing, I think it's totally possible. I don't see any reason why it couldn't happen, especially if we know that we have these dynamic changes in the distribution of mass on the planet. 12,000 years ago, there was a vastly different distribution of mass on the planet.
Yeah.
Seems like because we are in motion, we have angular momentum, that distribution plus maybe some external forces could cause a catastrophic shift.
Yep.
However, it seems more plausible to me that there is a periodicity to the magnetic pole flip.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Since we observe that on the sun, right? This is something that's we're actually watching take place at this moment.
Yeah.
The pole's beginning to flip. So I would look at like the lava. That situation in the lava seems like that's probably pole,
and since it's so regular, it's like a regular
periodicity.
Periodicity of the actual magnetic pole flipping as opposed to the crustal shift. And I don't see why the crustal shift would have to be 180 degrees.
No, of course. Yeah.
It could roll over to some random.
Seems like it would most likely be 90 degrees.
Yeah.
You get this buildup of ice on the poles, and then that is pulled out to the equatorial area.
Yeah, 90 degrees or even something else. Like all
slightly
it wants to do is equalize the exterior masses so that it's more equal. Then maybe it'll only roll 45 degrees.
What Randall talks about is one of the ways that happens is with isostasy.
Yeah.
So when you have an imbalance, if you push that thing in, just like if you're on the merry-go-round or whatever, and you got your legs out, you're slowing the spin down. But if you pull them in,
it speeds up.
You're moving your mass towards the. So one way of compensating for that is by the crust being pushed down or being lifted up.
Right. Yeah.
To compensate for the distribution of mass.
Yes. Yeah. And that very motion can increase the plasticity of the asthenosphere, and then that can cause crustal shift right there. Once that area right there is plastic enough, becomes like the viscosity drops, basically, then it can move.
And it also doesn't seem necessary to have the entire crust be displaced. A mountain climbs on top of another mountain.
Yeah, and we know that
can happen.
Yeah, we know that happens. That these mountain ranges have moved over top of older plates.
Right.
So it's a complex thing. Okay, from David, this is called Probably Not a Skirptard. It says, I am a transplant into Portland, Oregon via the California Bay Area and Santa Barbara. You've mentioned some weird things to look at near both of my previous snake holes. When you mentioned that you will be up here this summer to check out the rocks, I immediately thought of snakes! Exclamation mark. My 4th grade daughter was assigned by her teacher to watch this conference about the Missoula floods in the Columbia Gorge right after quarantine started. The night it aired, my daughter quickly became bored, but when she jumped off, I slithered in. Listening to Scott Burns talk about the Missoula floods made me wonder how a whole bunch of water could flood from Montana all the way out to Portland. Weird, right? That seems like a long way for a flood to travel. During the conference, he even had some old-timey pictures of some people with a big meteorite called the Willamette meteorite that apparently was carried during one of these floods out to Portland from Lake Missoula. At one point, someone asked him about dating when this happened, and he slyly sidestepped, possibly slithered past this comment by mentioning that they were in the process of doing some kind of special dating. Some of his comments made me think that he is not a scriptard, at least not at heart. At the end of the conference, I started to send you an email with a link to a recording that OMSI made of the conference, but my cell phone exited the email and all was lost. It was bedtime for my kids, so I decided to email you later. Today, I was listening to episode 143 and decided to try again. If you are bored one of these days and you want something to listen to before your trip, check it out. And he sends us the link to that. Yeah. He says, P.S. You previously mentioned my hometown of Concord, CA. He says, I just wanted to tell you that you should pronounce it as Concord. It should sound more like you were talking about a herd of conchs, a Concord. Minus the annoying H sound, so Concord. I have more to share, but we'll have to wait for another day. Thanks, man. That's cool. Concord. I mean, like, you know.
It sounds more like it was just taken over, you know.
What?
Conquered?
Oh, yeah, it's Concord? Yes. I have conquered you. A herd of conchs, I think is what he said. Okay. Yeah, thanks, David. That's cool. I'm glad you're enjoying the geology stuff. All right, this is from Shannon. It's titled Sir Hoyle. Hey, snakes. Cracking new lines on my face, which aches from laughing. Face ache. Great show this week. Sir Fred, what a grand gentleman. He's a treasure. Kyle's King's English Brit accent is exceptional. This night, Sir Hoyle hailed from West Yorkshire, God's country, and Yorkshire people have a very distinct way of speaking. And here's a great and funny example of said regional accent. And she sent us a YouTube link that we were listening to
I have to play
before the show, and we were cracking up.
I'll insert it in here and have to bleep it out.
Yeah. Yorkshire has all those caves that you've often read about on Brothers of the Serpent that have the plethora of blended exotic animals inside that were not brought over by crazy Romans. Home to super cool megaliths and Yorkshire pudding. Hope you're all well in Texas and getting plenty of barefoot time in its magical soil. And hi, Laura. Go well, Snake Bros. Shannon.
Oh, hey. Wow. That's so exciting. I just want to say hi all over.
This one's called Adamu 2.0 from Draga. It says, hello, snakely gents. Just discovered your podcasts. Don't always know what the hell you're talking about, but there are plenty of times I'm snorting in laughter right along with you. That's cool, man, because we don't always know what the hell we're talking about either. It says, I'm surfing YouTube, found the below link, and found it mail-worthy. Keep up the good work, and one day I might just catch on. Enjoy. And he sends a link. I haven't looked at this link, man. I'm sorry. I forgot about that. But I'll check it out.
And sometimes they're laughing at multiple things all at once.
Yes. Yeah. Our jokes are like the universe, complex. They start out simple, but they unfold into complexity. Okay. Let's see. Episode 124 from Reginald. I think 124 was... I checked this. It's the one we did with Mike and Maurice, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It says, damn, Snakes, I knew there was dialogue like this somewhere in the world. I needed this! Oh. Regarding episode number 124, Civilizations That Last with One Ruler for Thousands of Years, Julian Jaynes and his Origin of Consciousness in the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind has good information on how the consciousness of the king is passed down through the ages. Let me know what you think.
Yeah.
Yep. It is interesting. I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's somewhat in line with this whole idea in the Gods of Eden.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Like they were able to move their spirits in and out at will.
Yeah.
That was the tree of life, essentially, the full spiritual knowledge.
Right. Yeah.
And so you can live forever because, okay, let's just say like reincarnation, for example.
Yeah.
Somebody reincarnated, and this is going to happen. Like the idea is, if that happens, if souls just keep moving into other bodies, but look, once we're here, we forget.
Right.
We don't know. We don't remember.
Yeah.
But the idea is like
you can do that and remember.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're the same person.
Like in the Sumerian text, like those gods were able to do this, which is why they were able to live for, tens of thousands of years or something. And
yeah, I still haven't completely given up on the idea that they actually could live a very long time.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a cool idea.
Yeah.
Is the point. I'm not saying that that's the way it is. I have no idea because I can't remember.
Yeah.
what I was doing before I got here.
Yeah. Also, the guy's name is Julian James. I'm like, is that a pseudonym? I don't know. Is this, Jimmy James Jefferson Jackson Johnson Jr.? Like, come on, guy. What's your real name? Not that guy who sent the email, but the person he says who has this theory.
Yeah.
Watcher said, yeah, M&M's.
Yeah, Mike and Maurice's Mind Escape is 124. It's the swap cast.
M&M's ME.
All right, this one is from Roddy the Mammal. This Brotherhood of the Snake. It says, Dear Ophidian siblings.
Mammal.
Yes, Roddy the Mammal.
Mammals.
I was listening to the Gods of Eden podcast, and the Greek caduceus and rod of Asclepius symbols came to mind when you were talking about the Brotherhood of the Snake. Later on, I was watching a show on the Maya and was reminded of the Brotherhood when they were talking about the feathered serpent god Kukulkan. Now I am wondering, with such seemingly widespread veneration, if the snake was an important symbol to the megalithic and or Atlantean civilization X culture. Could the symbol of the snake be yet another missing puzzle piece of our forgotten past? Or is it time for me to get fitted with a custom-made tinfoil hat? Thank you in advance. Yours, Roddy the Mammal. I love his emails. Dear Ophidian siblings.
I loved that too.
Yeah. No, man, I think that's right, that the symbol of the serpent being venerated by all these very ancient cultures, and sometimes is so far back into prehistory that it disappears into the mists, as they say,
Yeah.
that like what Bramley is basically saying is that this symbol of the serpent comes originally from Ea, from Enki.
Yeah.
And that may be the case. I don't know. I tend to think that way too. And the reason why all these ancient megalithic civilizations sort of venerated the serpent is because of Ea initially, but then later it became a symbol of knowledge. The reason it's on the caduceus is because it was a symbol of healing, right? Wizardry. So people who did magic, people who looked at the stars, that whole thing, like the people who had this knowledge, who could guide kings or guide civilizations or build things that would predict stuff. That's a sort of a kind of I view that as a magical kind of thing. You can easily see how somebody who knows how to set up a series of objects that can cast shadows in particular ways, that can tell you certain stuff about gigantic astronomical cycles of these lights in the sky, is magic.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So,
did they add the second snake to the caduceus after the guy was like, "It's a double helix"? I mean,
there's old symbols of that.
That's crazy,
I know.
Yeah. But yeah, man, you don't need a tinfoil hat. You just need to shave your fur and put on a scaly skin, buddy.
Yeah.
Join with us.
Yes. I mean, how long are you going to keep being a mammal guy? You've been listening to the show long enough that I think you're probably, you might need to shed your skin.
That's right. Shed skin pale.
All right, that's all the emails for this week. That was great, guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We're done.
All right.
Break time?
Yes, sir.
All right. Back in a minute.
Snakes!
Idiot. What a dirty little Dutch buffle-brained bastard. Put on his pox crown up his royal pox arse.
That's how I feel about myself right now, because I didn't push record on Laura's track in the first segment. But that is the proper Yorkshire accent.
Yeah, that came from the video that she said this is how they actually talk. So there's no way we can replicate that, I don't think.
I don't think so. But Laura, I've got your mic recording now, so
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
sounds great.
Good.
Man, I'm sorry. Like last time I gave her a mute button, it was a push to talk, and then I shouldn't have done that because it's hard to remember to push it to talk. And this time I gave her a mic and then just didn't record it.
Snake Bro's most forgotten artifact. The
so
record
mad.
button.
It's totally
got real
fine.
mad.
I'm still enjoying myself thoroughly. I'm happy to be here.
So
It's no big deal.
Yeah, so we will be going back and redoing the intro that we were all commenting on in the first segment,
Yeah. Which is good.
which
'cause-
you've already heard. So this is one of those weird time loop thingers.
But it's great because I didn't like it and I can make it better. And hey, girl, Shannon, now that we can hear me.
Real quickly, I wanted to give a shout out to Levi for his recent donation to the pyramid scheme. Thank you so much, buddy. And also our patron saint, who I'm going to dox, Patrick Hicks.
Oh, yeah.
He is actually the first person to ever donate to the pyramid scheme, and he's been donating ever since every month. And I just wanted to give him a shout out. We really appreciate it, man. He
love
actually,
you, Patrick.
before we ever had the pyramid scheme, Patrick called me and was like, "Dude, what do you guys need? I'll give you money."
Yeah, he was.
It's just like, thanks, bro. So yeah,
We'll call you.
it was sort of like
We're gonna call you.
sort of like prompted us to like get the pyramid scheme going, and then he immediately signed up. So thank both of you guys, Levi and Patrick.
Yeah.
Appreciate it so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So, Laura, let's talk about what you've got.
So you probably couldn't hear me say it earlier. Maybe you could, maybe you couldn't. We're not gonna know right now. So it's okay. It is a lot to take in sitting in this room with you guys, like I've said before. So I re-listened, took some notes, made sure I'm wrapping my head around what's going on in the book. But I guess what I really started thinking about in depth was rituals. I haven't thought of rituals the way that I do now, I guess. And I guess now I'm kind of suspicious
Yeah.
of all rituals, like personal or community-based or religious or just like everything. And it's because I was telling Kyle this earlier in the car today. Spirit slammed together with some matter. Now we have Homo sapien.
Yeah.
Right? This is Aya's scientific God's little creation here. But it works two ways. So the spirit can have this effect on the physical. The physical can have an effect. So I was telling Kyle, I'm thinking about all these rituals and how slowly over these many, many, many years, you've almost got like this organism now that's very different than it was. Kyle, maybe you can help me out.
So you're saying because you start doing this ritual, whatever the ritual is, and it either, if it's a physical thing that you're doing that's ritualistic and you continue to do it, that starts to
Change
have an
you.
effect on your mind or on the spirit aspect of you. Or if it's a spiritual ritual, it has an effect on your body.
Yeah.
And so like the idea of these rituals being set up over that become sort of something that humans do for thousands of years, perhaps, it begins to change the way the two things are coupled together or something like.
Yes, I'm looking at it like if you looked at the human race as a big organism, because we actually are built this way with the way that we were created, where we've got this spirit from these godlike or these gods, So we're like them in this sense. Even you said even they were prone to the drama and the rivalries. And, And we have this physical matter, and the way that they work together, it's like a two-way street. And I just did some, easy breezy looking around on the internet about rituals just in general. And I was reading about the performance anxiety rituals. It's very common for an athlete has to go perform. Some anxiety comes with that.
Yeah.
They have a ritual.
Yeah.
They lowers things. And then I read some stuff that was saying then people get so used to the ritual when the ritual's not done, just simply that the
Causes
ritual
anxiety.
causes the anxiety.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking we've got twisted messages going on here being sent through these rituals, through all these people, and it's actually like changing them.
Yep.
Really.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry,
Where-
it just really blew my mind. So I feel like I have to take a moment there because
yeah.
I haven't really looked at it like that before.
Yeah. Now, where is the science to build a ritual, right? Mm-hmm. That's the question. Is like kind of like how we said, you know, where is the technology? Where did the technology come from to come up with stories that would be told throughout the ages, right? That's a technology that we no longer seem to have.
Yeah, and the continuation of telling the story is a ritual. It's like you sit around the campfire, you sing the song or whatever, you tell the story.
Yeah.
It's like, so all these stories we've been telling ourselves for all these thousands of years, is a ritual that,
And we don't really know which ones are true.
And we don't know which ones are good and which ones aren't.
Exactly. And it's not like, and it's not even like they are good or bad, but they're powerful.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like,
yeah, like
does it have a good effect on you or a bad one, right? And maybe you're right. Maybe with some people, it's like that kind of ritual works for that person, whereas it wouldn't work for somebody else. You know, and yeah, I know what you're talking about with the sports stuff. Like people have, and I've heard it called superstition. You know, like some baseball player like only wears this specific kind of sock when he goes to play, and that's because he's like, that's when I do badass.
it's a snake sock.
Does that sock really make him do awesome, or is it because he thinks that?
Yes, this mind over matter, I guess. Is
Yeah. So it does cut both ways.
It does. It works both ways. And so when I really started thinking about that, I was just like, whoa, I'm like going down a rabbit hole right now and everything about rituals and like what's going on with them. But I also thought, so could you be part of a ritual and then actually be thinking the whole time you're doing the ritual with the said people or whatever, thinking, I don't believe it. Like, can you break the, are we powerful enough to be part of a ritual that's going to change us physically if we do it with the mindset and the spiritual to match with it? Or is there a way that you could even maybe break that apart and
like actually perform the ritual without having it affect you? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. Like, could you be thinking the whole time, like, I don't believe this.
Yeah.
I don't. And I wonder if that.
I mean, I'm sure people do that. Yeah.
I wonder if it works.
I don't know. Like, so
I would suggest that in the corporate world, people do that all the time.
Yeah.
There are all kinds of rituals in the corporate world that people just like, well, this is just what I have to do to just deal with this situation. And they all do it.
But their physical body is like then in a habit.
I mean, it does affect them. Yeah.
I feel like it has to affect you. I guess that's where I'm coming to. I'm like, it has to affect you.
Yeah.
How
So
can
I
it
think
not affect you?
So I would suggest that number one, there's a lot of gray area. So you can say that, these are bad or good, but there's gray area, right? And it's each individual's mindset, like you were pointing out, going into it, that's going to have probably the ultimate effect.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So if like, just take yoga, for example, like some people really get into it and try to get into that sort of calming and all that. And it's whether it's a placebo or it really is, it can have a great effect on them, both physically and mentally.
Yeah.
But then other people that are like, say if you're dragged into a yoga studio by your wife or your, whatever, and you're just like, come on, let's do it. And you're just like, ugh.
Yeah,
and you may not get any enjoyment out of it. Maybe you come out and you're like, yeah, it kind of feels good to stretch, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it has to do with your mindset going in.
Yeah.
So the true believers go far, whether it's good or bad. It's just powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Yeah. I'll bring up science fiction again, right? Heinlein used to say in a bunch of his books, if the natives of whatever, like just the people who live in some area, just that's what he meant by natives, wherever you are, if they rub blue mud into their belly button, then you rub blue mud into your belly button just as solemnly as they do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Implication being like, you want to fit in, you don't have to believe, but you rub that blue mud and you look just as serious as they do when you're doing it. Right?
Well, it's like when we were going to New
Partake
York.
in the ritual in
Yeah.
order to partake in the greater ritual of belonging to the civilization.
Yeah.
It's like when we were going to New York often, back when you were in the school up there. Remember, when we first went, everybody's like, oh, they're like, you need help finding your way? Where are you guys going? And they would just like approach you and just ask you where you were going because they could tell, like, we didn't know
it's obvious.
what.
Yeah, it's obvious.
And so we were like, after a while, we kind of figured it out. We're like, okay, we tried to fit in. We tried
Yeah.
to dress more like them, and then eventually people just didn't stop and ask you stuff because
Right.
you kind of
Yeah.
you want to fit in.
Right. Rub
Yeah.
that blue mud.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we were straight up rubbing the blue mud on our
Yeah.
bellies, and it was sort of an achievement, when you're walking down the street and then some obvious tourist comes up to you and is like, "Hey man, how do I get to blah blah blah?"
Yeah,
You're like, "Yes."
Hey.
Yeah. So when I was listening to the first two parts to take my notes, I was happy that you said this one thing that you said. I was like, oh, he's brought some hope to this. Because I was kind of going doom and gloom, like, oh man, here's the human race created by somebody who wasn't like really, trying to just make us slaves, didn't really have a, negative. But the original message has been corrupted, and now, it's just, we got the corrupt brotherhood. And it was just, I just felt like I was doom and gloom.
Yeah.
And then Kyle's like, well, I don't know. I think there's always been some of the good people in there still fighting. Like, I felt like you gave us hope, so I was happy for that.
Yeah, I think that I agree with Kyle, like that the black and white nature of Bramley's outlook is not quite how I see it anymore.
Yeah. So going to that, thinking like, oh yeah, he's right. I guess maybe I had just even forgotten that was an option. I got so engulfed in like, what is this information? What?
Yeah.
And then Kyle's like, oh no, we're okay. I'm like, okay, we're okay.
I mean, we're not okay.
Well, I mean, we're not. But
We're all gonna die.
But
Yeah.
going to that there's still a lot of good in there, and we've got this leveling factor of the good and the evil.
Yeah.
But they can always get a one up on the other, or whatever I'm trying to say. But
Yeah.
so then that's where I started thinking, it's so mixed up and messed up though, because you've got the good, these people that are trying to bring back the original message. But now they're like having to hang with the corrupt brotherhood and like do their thing and slowly pull it back. I don't know. I just went real deep into like, okay, everything we do actually matters.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like everything. Like what
Yeah.
you're thinking, what you're doing.
I think so. The message that I get from the book in big part is Bramley is initially saying we need a spiritual science. Right? Heinlein used to say that we need a real science of psychology. Like if we had a real science of psychology and understood the human mind, really, like understood it in a scientific sense as opposed to like this sort of mushy pseudoscience that it is. If you had a real science, then there would be, things would be a lot clearer. So what he's saying is if we had a real, and this is what he was talking about with the fruits of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil versus the tree of knowledge of the tree of life, one represents actual science of ethics, okay, and the other one represents a science of spirit. And those are the two things that are being withheld from the human race by all of this corruption, which is really about the loss of information. Because there's a lot of implications in a lot of ancient stories that we did used to have a lot better understanding of this stuff. And I mean, even you go to the Yuga cycles where they say there was a golden age where, this stuff was clear. And people were much higher elevated in terms of spirit and physical, both, right? Because if you have a true understanding of the spirit, then your physical body is risen up with that, right? And then you have much more control over yourself, your physical body, and then of course the world around you. And there's all these ideas that some of these people, I mean, it went as far as having mental abilities to move objects, right? You have telepathy and telekinesis.
Like Jedis?
Yeah, like a Jedi, right? Like going within yourself in order to control, to have, if you wanted it, control of the outside. But first you have to control yourself. Right?
Yeah.
There's that whole like, what was it, the difference between Yoda and Vader? Yoda wanted to conquer inner space. Vader wanted to conquer outer space. And that is the fundamental difference between the good and the bad sides of the Force.
Oh, James Lucas was a genius.
I love that.
So, hey, those are great thoughts. And I agree that, in a lot of, I read this book now, I'm looking at it with like these eyes years later because I read this multiple times, but I go through it now and I'm like, it's not quite like that, but still, he's making good points. And I think he's looking at this from a historical perspective, but my biggest problem as I go through the book is he has an assumption of what spirit stuff how spirit stuff works. And I'm like, guy, you don't really know any of that stuff. Like he'll say like, well, it's obvious that spiritual understanding was corrupted. I'm like, wait a minute, you can't say that without having first an understanding of non-corrupted spiritual stuff, and nobody has that, right? I mean, at least that's what I think is like his assumption is that he knows how the spirit stuff's supposed to work.
Yeah.
Well, maybe he was visited by aliens, Russ. We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know. But I think UFOs are real, and I think God's flying them, and that's probably really
Lowercase
going
G
on.
gods. Yeah.
Lowercase G gods.
That's where we came up. So we after reading this book, we started making the distinction. We started calling these the lowercase G gods because, the uppercase, the quote unquote uppercase G god, the way we would describe things would be
the supreme being.
The supreme being, the creator of the universe, the grand architect, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And whether or not that is a benevolent being that cares about, that knows every single hair on your head or not.
Yeah. Sees every sparrow fall.
I like the idea, and Randall talks about this, like the architect. This is the idea of the divine creation or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's just by observing nature, you can see how beautiful it is and these patterns and all this kind of stuff. And you kind of get a sense of the genius and the
mind of the creator. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
These guys are lowercase G gods. And I was pointing out to Laura earlier that a lot of this stuff comes from the Sumerian texts. These guys, who they are, what they were doing. And so this is sort of his, Bramley's interpretation of all this stuff and how it applies to why we're always at war and all this kind of stuff, which I think he's onto something there, and that's stuck with me for a long time. But
I think
initially,
he has a lot of great things to really just think about.
Yeah. Initially, I was just like, oh my God, but as we went along and started looking into all the individual texts and the various mysteries, we sort of came to the conclusion that, okay, it's not so black and white, right?
Yeah.
That there's a lot of gray area. And this is part of that is like, why was the knowledge hidden? And perhaps, it makes sense that it was hidden to preserve it as well.
Right.
So there's...
But it's also a lot's lost. Some's hidden specifically,
Exactly.
and so much is lost.
And there's...
through the ritual.
Yeah, that's quant stuff, right? Yeah, stuff has been lost that way.
And there's the possibility of, destruction of knowledge and destruction of the golden age by forces that were trying to do that, right, with malicious intent. And then there's just the natural forces that destroy worlds.
Yes.
That we've been obviously studying with Randall and all of that. So you kind of got to take in all of this stuff and say, okay, yes, some of this was lost because of the Younger Dryas or what, maybe.
Exactly.
So yeah, there was one other point. I can't remember what it was.
Well, can I say something really
Yeah.
quick while you're thinking? You said that you read this book for the first time like 6 years ago.
I think that's right.
It was whenever that first...
Yeah, 2014.
Yeah.
I mean, it was before we began the podcast, which is
yeah.
at least a couple of years.
And then you knew about it too. He was reading it. You knew about it too. And
yeah,
then,
he brought it to me.
Yeah. So Kyle just kind of, like, what would you say, like dropped a summary on me in the kitchen one day of just like what's in this book.
Yeah.
Like 6 years ago. But I haven't really, it's not like it's been, topic of conversation a lot. So 6 years later, I'm like stuck in this room, like trying to absorb it. And then, anyway, so I'm happy to get to talk about it. I know it's kind of like old news for you guys, but I'm happy to kind of have my mind blown. And I'm really suspicious of all rituals now.
Good. I think...
I am definitely suspicious of rituals.
questioning everything is a good thing.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm happy to feel that way right now.
But again, I would point out, I mean, you even brought this up, that the oral traditions were a ritual. And without those, so much of the ancient texts that we have, we would not have, because they were written down eventually after the oral traditions preserved them. So, like, once again, we have, all this gray area. There's good and bad and everything. And in any institution that humans are involved in, there's nefarious characters. There's good people.
It's really interesting to think about why we get stuck in our ways like that, though. Like even in there, before we came on, you're like, I've got that espresso machine up there I'm never making.
Yeah, and
I'm
you're like, no, we have this whole ritual.
We have a whole thing. Like, please don't, don't mess with our coffee ritual.
Yeah. Yeah, she got very disturbed that I might disturb their coffee ritual
by
bringing an
did.
espresso machine down to their house.
I really did. I was like, no, you can't mess with this. So anyway, I'm suspicious of that now. Now I'm like, okay, well, why am I? You know what? I just need to let him bring it.
I mean, I have. Well, the difference between the rituals you build for yourself, as in a daily, ritual, what people call a daily ritual, versus a mystical tradition. Those are different things, I think. But
I'm just talking about in general how it has that effect on you.
Yeah, you can get in this rut, and
you
you're
get
like,
in
"This
these
is how I do it."
Yes.
And then if something happens to get you out of that rut, you kind of get there's this anxiety. Yeah, no, don't let that happen. Don't let that happen. You got to roll with the punches.
So I think maybe you should bring me I think he should bring it down, babe, just so we can knock that out.
I have an espresso machine that never gets used right now, and I was like, "You guys want to? You'll never burn your coffee with this thing."
Hey, man, Laura rules the house. So
right.
If she has a place to put it, go for it.
Let me think about it.
The Watcher, by the way, the Watcher says blowing minds is kind of our deal here. That's kind of the thing we do.
I know. What's that about? Oh.
That's the mind explosion sound effect.
See, my mind just got blown.
Yeah, those are good. Those were good points. I had one other one so another thing I wanted to talk about before we start back into the book is, this is more science fiction, right? Larry Niven.
I love it.
The God Gambit. I've talked to you about this. So in the Ringworld series, okay, so picture that the Ringworld series is about, they find a star where all the planets that used to be around that star have been completely converted into something else, and they've made a giant ring around the sun at the distance of the orbit of the Earth-ish, so that it would be Earth-like on the inside of the ring. Okay, so imagine this ring. It's 1 million miles thick or wide, and it has tall walls facing the sun on the inside to hold the atmosphere in.
Okay,
and it's relatively thin, so they've had to build the landscape into the material. So mountains are actually, if you look at it from the bottom side, you see the indents where the mountains are on the other side sticking up. Okay. So it's enormous, 1 million miles across, and then it's the entire orbit around the entire star. And to get daylight and sunlight, or daylight and night, they have a system of plates that are closer to the sun that rotate. So the plate will cover the sun for a while and casts a shadow on that part of the ring and makes night there.
Yeah.
But the whole time you're on the ring, you can see the rest of it. It's flat. It looks flat. It goes out and disappears, and then it becomes an arc that goes over the sun. Okay, so most of the people that live on it now are primitive. It was built by this incredibly advanced race, and then they planted all these people there and then left. And so most of the people that are there are primitive. They don't know it's a ring, right? They think it's a flat Earth with an arch going over the sun, because that's what
I was going to say, this sounds like flat Earth.
Yeah, it looks flat to them.
Okay.
But the God Gambit is that the characters in the book go there in a very advanced spaceship, and they're trying to investigate this object because they saw it. Somebody found it. They're like, what is that ring around that star way out there? So they sent this expedition to go out there to look at it, and it took them 2 years to get there, even going faster than light. It's so far away. So when they get there, it's a human, and he's got an alien with him that looks like a big giant cat that walks on 2 legs.
Okay.
No, it wasn't about Alamatandra, no.
Okay. Different story.
Different author and different alien. Yeah, about Alamatandra. No, he looked like a pear with like 8 arms or whatever. No, this was a giant. It was called a Kazin. That's the name of the race. Huge, like 12 feet tall, massive cat. Okay, terrifying looking. But the God Gambit was, if they needed something from a particular group of natives on the inside of the ring, right? Lewis, the human, would stay in the spaceship floating above the village and send the cat down to be the emissary of the god, which was the ship. So this is called the God Gambit, right? And so they would get the cat would go down. He's terrifying, but the cat would act terrified of this thing in the sky. That's the god. So the cat is terrifying to the people, and they're like, holy shit, he's scary, but he's scared of that.
Yeah.
Right? And so that they would be able to manipulate the natives into giving them whatever information they wanted. Yeah.
Yeah, and you see that.
So the God Gambit is being played in a lot of these old stories. You see it. You have the emissary who kind of knows actually what's going on, but they're a messenger to these people who all they see is this terrifying object in the sky.
Yeah.
And this person who has all these powers who is nevertheless scared of that thing.
Don't shoot the messenger.
Right? It's called the God Gambit. So.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, this is all him. It's not me. I'm just here.
Yeah.
Okay, just give me your stuff. I'll
Right.
go.
Demonstrate that you have like terrifying magical powers, but that this even scarier thing is demanding something from these people, right? That's the God Gambit.
I love it. I love science fiction.
Ring World Series is great, people. You should check it out. Larry Niven. Okay, so the last part we were reading in the book, we were looking at the Indian Maverick movements and Buddhism. So he says Buddhism spread rapidly throughout the Far East, like the Samkhya system. Buddhism, in its original form, did not worship the Vedic gods. It opposed the caste system and did not support Brahminical or advanced Hindu doctrines. Unlike many modern Buddhists, early Buddhists did not worship Buddha as a god. Instead, they respected him as a thinker who had designed a method by which an individual, through his or her own efforts, might achieve spiritual freedom by way of knowledge and spiritual exercises. So, it is difficult to determine how successful early Buddhists actually were in achieving their aims, although Siddhartha did claim to have personally attained a state of spiritual liberation. So, Siddhartha is the Buddha, Gautama Siddhartha. So, he claimed to have personally attained a state of spiritual liberation, and then he was trying to teach people how to do it. And that's what started Buddhism. Buddhism, like the other Maverick systems, underwent a great deal of change, splintering, and decay as the centuries progressed. This caused the loss of most of Siddhartha's true teachings. In addition, many teachings and practices not created by Buddha were later added to his religion and mislabeled as Buddhism. A good example of this decay is found in the definition of nirvana. The word nirvana originally referred to that state of existence in which the spirit has achieved full awareness of itself as a spiritual being and no longer experiences suffering due to misidentification with the material universe. Nirvana is the state striven for by every Buddhist. Nirvana also has been translated as nothingness or the void. These are horrible sounding concepts which have come to imply to many people today that nirvana is a state of non-existence, or that it involves a loss of contact with the physical universe. In truth, the original Maverick goal was to achieve quite the opposite state. Buddha's true state of nirvana included a stronger sense of existence, increased self-identity, and an ability to more accurately perceive the physical universe. So we've talked about this before, the people the nothingness people.
Yeah.
What have you said about the nothingness?
Oh man, I rail on them pretty hard. But
Well, can I hear a couple?
Okay. So my problem, I don't know. I've always had a problem with that idea because it's escapism. It's not.
Yeah.
The whole idea is that the best state of being is transcendence. It's going beyond where we are and what we're doing, and that's sort of, what's the point of that? Is my question. Like what I prefer is to. Well, I don't know. It seems like it would be better to achieve some status of awareness of your surroundings, right? That's good. Awareness
like a heightened awareness of
of the world around you, and
in both the spiritual and material sense.
Okay.
And that's what this says. He says that the original idea of nirvana was to achieve a stronger sense of existence, an increased self-identity, and ability to more accurately perceive the physical universe. But
so that sounds great.
Yeah, but the concept of the void or nirvana now is that you get to this certain state and then like there's a nothingness, right? And like we were talking before the show, that's actually just the first step. You have to achieve this in order to go farther. Right, and so we've talked about this.
The idea of transcendentalism to me is not a good end goal.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it's bad to be able to achieve some ability to do that.
I gotcha.
Right, because maybe you need that a little bit, but that's not the end goal.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Otherwise, if like everybody achieved it, we'd all just become nothing and we'd be like zombies.
That's why we have one friend who has done this. He's gotten to the nothingness state or whatever, and I used to call him a nihilist because of it. Right? Because he was like, man, there's nothing. It's just like you can't even talk about it because nothing is real. Nothing. You realize that there's nothing. You're not even real. And I'm like, so you're a nihilist? Just like nothing, bro, is the answer. And I mean, you can't even have an answer because nothing, right?
Yeah.
Why even ask the question?
Yeah, that's tough.
It's really funny watching Russ.
Yeah, I just rag on him so hard.
Oh,
dude.
I was
Russ and
sitting here.
Brendan.
I'm like, is the name going to be dropped? I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah,
who
no,
it is.
he knows who he is. I
Yeah.
rag on him so hard. dude.
Okay, now that I'm up to speed on who it is, I'm with us. Yeah,
And,
I've asked questions. Well, because he's been training under someone else.
Yeah.
And I've asked him before. I'm like, so what? I don't even ask him. Have not asked him. I don't think personally what he thinks. I've been asking him, what does that guy think? What is he telling you? What is he? I want to know what that guy.
What his master thinks. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I've
His
been
teacher.
asking questions about. I'm wanting to know what he's just being
Yeah.
told.
I
all
think
the
he's
time.
still trying to figure that out, right?
Oh, okay.
That's the point of being the student.
Well, he had some answers for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, we figured out that the nothingness people are dumb. Okay.
We still love you, Brendan.
Okay, so he says, if we compare maverick religion to custodial religions, we discover a number of very distinct differences by which a person may distinguish between them. A chart comparing the key philosophies by which they most strongly differ might look something like this. And now he has this chart, so I'm going to just go through it. So custodial religion, source or inspiration of teaching is said to be God or an angel or a supernatural force, not a human being. Whereas a maverick religion, the source or inspiration of teachings is said to be an identifiable human. In the custodial side, belief in a single supreme being or God is a principal cornerstone of faith. In earlier times, worship of many human-like gods. Whereas in the maverick, belief in a supreme being is usually tolerated but is a minor or non-existent part of the doctrine. Emphasis is placed on the role of the individual spiritual being and its relationship to the universe. Okay, custodial. Physical immortality is an important or desired goal in many custodial religions. Whereas on the maverick side, spiritual freedom and immortality are sought. Endless existence in the same physical body is deemed unimportant or undesirable. Custodial. Adherence to doctrine based upon faith or obedience alone is stressed. Maverick. Observation and reason are held to be the proper foundations for adhering to any doctrine. Custodial. Severe or fatal physical punishments are sometimes employed or advocated during the religion's history to deal with non-believers or backsliders. Maverick. Physical punishments or duress are very mild to non-existent, and severest punishment is usually formal exclusion of an individual from the religious organization, like excommunication.
Right.
Yeah. Yes, we get to that, Watcher. He's talking about the Jesus was a maverick. Yes, we get to that part in the book. Okay, so custodial side. Belief that being born in a human body, either once or many times through reincarnation, is part of a broad spiritual plan which will ultimately benefit every human being. Maverick. Belief that there is no hidden spiritual purpose to human existence and that the process of death, amnesia, rebirth causes spiritual decay. So like the death, then forgetting, and then being reborn, not knowing who you were before, is a problem in the maverick side. Their goal is to achieve some spiritual point to where you can be reborn and remember, right?
Yeah.
To disconnect the spirit enough from the physical body to realize that you don't have to be there, I guess is the idea. And this is kind of what that guy was saying in the email, that some kings could do this and thus rule for thousands of years.
Right.
Okay, custodial side. Belief that there are higher forces or gods or supernatural entities which control people's individual or collective fates. Human beings have no control over those forces and can only yield to them. Maverick side. Belief that all people are ultimately responsible for having created their own conditions in life, good and bad, by their own actions and inactions, and that all people can ultimately control their own destinies. Custodial side. Belief that only one supreme being alone created the physical universe. Maverick side. Belief that everyone has something to do with the creation and or perpetuation of the physical universe. Custodial side. Human suffering, toil, and enslavement are part of a broader spiritual plan, which will ultimately lead to salvation and freedom for those who obediently endure it. Maverick side. Human suffering, toil, and enslavement are social ills that have no constructive purpose and stand in the way of spiritual salvation and freedom. Custodial side. Spiritual recovery and salvation depend entirely upon the grace of God or some other supernatural entity. Maverick. Spiritual recovery and salvation are entirely up to the individual to achieve through his or her own self-motivated effort. So that's the end of the chart.
Did we set that? Did we flip that over?
Yeah, and that's the end of the segment too. Yeah.
I've been so engulfed.
Yeah.
Oh, this is so good. I love being in here.
All right, we're going to take a break.
Yep. Back. Second half of the show. Ladies and gentlemen, here at the Snake Bros Institute for Advanced Coprolite Studies, where there are no degrees, only certificates of ignorance that you have to print yourself. And quite a few people have done that. I was looking at the the snake pit. There's some good comments in here. John said, Yamato-san and I are having a Gods of Eden listening session tonight. He comes over for dinner and we play the sods of our choice. By the second break of the first half, we are usually pretty well buzzed from booze and high from 30% brain expansion.
I love that.
Yeah. I missed that.
It was really good, babe.
Oh, all right. I'll have to just come back. I'm like, just realized somehow I lost the watcher. Oh, yeah. There he is.
Oh, no. Okay.
And Chris from Dabbler's Den said, so I've been thinking about the whole idea of confusion of tongues. If all of this stems from fragmented comet impacts, what do you snakes think about it actually being caused by the loss of hearing for a whole generation of man due to sonic booms and shockwaves afterwards? Yeah.
Oh my God!
Like they would not.
That.
They would
That's
all
genius.
be deaf. They wouldn't be able to teach their kids how to talk.
My God!
That's a really good idea and point.
Yeah. So then, when they go deaf, knowing how to talk, but then
how do you teach?
But they eventually all of their language changes because they can't hear themselves speaking.
Yeah. And what do the kids sound like when the parents can't really? And so the language just totally changes. Completely new ones come up. Yeah. So I thought that was a good point. At first I was like, skirp derp.
But the disparate survivors, like Randall was talking about, like here's a mountaintop and then 50 miles away, there's another mountaintop with a group of people. And they don't ever even know that the other people survived.
Yeah, you think everyone's dead, but you.
And so they end up living and speaking deaf to their children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Who was that?
That was Chris Cottrell from Dabbler's Den. Yeah.
Really Dabbler's
good
Den.
You're a genius.
Yep.
Got the mind blown button.
Yeah.
Sorry about the first guy. Maybe there would have been a key for you, but I was paying attention.
Also, 2 of the New England snakes have been connected in here.
All right.
So if you're one of the New England snakes and you're not in the Discord, or you're in the Discord and you're not Boom Boom Boogie Woogie Bassman or BT, then talk to those guys because they're the New England snakes. And you know there's at least 3 of you.
Okay, so now that you guys are in there.
Sounds like a soccer team.
Now that you guys are in there, I posted some stuff in there, I guess, last week.
Yeah.
So I need to go repost it in the chat somewhere for you guys to check out.
Yes.
So. But anyway.
All right. So yeah, I just wanted to bring it. There's a great stuff going on in the snake pit in there. Okay. So back to the Gods of Eden by William Bramley. Some readers will observe that many custodial and maverick elements listed above are mixed together in some religions. A good example of this is Hinduism. Such mixtures are usually concocted when maverick ideas are incorporated into a custodial religion or when custodial doctrines are added to maverick teachings. When either happens, the full benefits of the maverick teachings are lost. This is especially clear in modern Buddhism, where rituals, idolatry, and prayers to Buddha have almost entirely supplanted the practical system Buddha had tried to develop. Although Buddhism did not free the human race, it left the hope that freedom would one day come. According to Buddhist legend, Gautama knew that he had not accomplished his goal of creating a religion that would bring about full spiritual liberation for all mankind. He therefore promised that a second Buddha, or enlightened one, would arrive later in history to complete the task. This is like another common thing, you know, I will return, or someone will return, or there's going to be...
Yeah.
This promise constitutes the famous Mataya, or friend prophecy, which has become a very important element of modern Buddhist faith. Because Buddhism did not originally express a belief in a supreme being, the Mataya legend did not suggest a messenger or teacher from God. Mataya would simply be an individual with the knowledge and ability to get the job done. Precisely when in history Mataya was to arrive is hotly debated in some circles. Many Buddhist sources say that he would come 5,000 years after Buddha's death. Others have said half of that. Many Buddhist leaders have come along in history claiming to be Mataya. None of them were successful in bringing about the world promised by Buddha, so most Buddhists still wait. As time went on, the Mataya prophecy decayed with the rest of Buddhism. The legend was slowly absorbed into a very destructive doctrine being spread by Brotherhood sources in the Middle East and elsewhere. The doctrine of the quote-unquote end of the world, also known by such dramatic names as the Day of Judgment, the Final Battle, Armageddon, and others. End of the world teachings have had a catastrophic effect on human society. It is therefore of paramount importance to understand more about where and why these teachings began. All right, so chapter 11, Prophets of Doom. This is my chosen career path. Ask almost anyone, do you believe in a future judgment day of some kind? Chances are that she or he will answer yes. Next to a belief in God, belief in a judgment day may be the most widespread religious concept in the modern world. Even many people who are openly atheistic often experience an innate feeling that some sort of grand judgment or realignment lies ahead. Most Judgment Day teachings are found in the writings of religious prophets who claim to have received mystical revelations from God concerning the future of the world. This type of prophetic writing is usually called an apocalypse. The word apocalypse comes from the Greek words apo, or off, and kalyptine, or to cover. An apocalypse is therefore the taking off of a cover, i.e. a revelation. Right? So something's hidden, you remove the cover, it's a revelation. Apocalypse.
Yeah.
Most apocalypses follow a similar pattern. Mankind will suffer upheaval during a future global cataclysm. The cataclysm will be followed by a day of judgment in which God or a representative of God will decide the fate of every person on earth. Only those people who are obedient to the religion preaching the apocalypse will be granted mercy on the day of judgment. Everyone else will be doomed to death or eternal spiritual damnation. The judgment day will be followed by a utopia on earth to be enjoyed only by those who believed and obeyed. Despite promises of a universal Shangri-La, these teachings often terrified people, and they still cause unease today. As we shall discuss shortly, fearsome apocalypses give spiritual truths another false twist, and more obviously, they subdue people into obeying a specific religion or leader. End-of-the-world doctrines also make people afraid to explore competing religious systems, such as those offered by religious mavericks. Judgment Day teachings ultimately amount to extortion, obey, or die. The question is, who implanted apocalyptic beliefs on Earth? A supreme being is usually cited, but is a supreme being truly the source? A careful look at history reveals that apocalyptic teachings first arose out of custodial activity and from sources within the corrupted Brotherhood network. End-of-the-world doctrines were disseminated by early Brotherhood missionaries and conquerors, hand in hand with monotheism. It is therefore not surprising to learn that final battle doctrines have some roots in a famous Brotherhood symbol discovered on ancient Egyptian relics. The symbol was the mythical bird known as the phoenix. The phoenix is a fictional bird which is said to live 500 to 600 years before burning itself to death in a nest of herbs. Out of the ashes emerges a small worm, which grows back into the phoenix. The phoenix repeats this life and death rebirth cycle over and over again endlessly. The phoenix legend is an allegory or a story with an underlying meaning or symbol designed to impart a deeper truth. Precisely what that truth is has been lost, and so we find people interpreting the phoenix legend in a variety of ways. And I think one of the ways we look at it is that this actually happens to the Earth sometimes when large flaming things come down from space and set everything on fire. And then there has to be a rebirth afterwards, right?
Yeah.
Life once again rises from the ashes. So, for example, many people see the phoenix as a symbol of resurrection or spiritual survival after death. A soul is born into a body, the body flowers, the body undergoes the fiery rigors of life and death, and the soul remains intact to rise and build again. Others see the phoenix as a symbol of the birth, growth, decay cycle upon which the physical elements of the universe seem to operate, behind which there lies an indestructible spiritual reality. Regrettably, the Phoenix legend, like so many other mystical allegories of the Egyptian Brotherhood, distorted important truths. The legend came to convey the false idea that there exists some kind of unalterable law or plan which mandates that spiritual existence must consist of an arduous, phoenix-like process of growing, dying by fire, emerging out of the ashes, growing again, dying again, and so on forever. While this process does seem to regulate life on Earth, it is neither natural, inevitable, or healthy. So this is what I'm like, where do you get that part? You know, his assumption that he knows that this is not natural, inevitable, or healthy. Like, how do you know this?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, but also the part about the apocalypse, you know, myths or whatever being custodial introductions into the story or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think, I think, again, that's sort of...
It's the obey or die part that he's talking about, right?
Well, but, you know, as we talked about when we were looking at the Zendavesta and
Yeah.
all that weird stuff about, like, you know, don't put your dead bodies in the water and stuff. It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, you know, we've looked at this like, okay, these can be traditions that have been quansuffed
yeah.
that come from an actual, like, okay, climb up on a mountain and you won't die.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Dig a huge hole in the ground and you won't die. Build a boat and you won't die.
Yeah.
So there's an element of truth that may not be, obviously they don't know when the next destruction is coming or what type of destruction it will
Yeah.
be. And some people are quote unquote chosen
Yeah.
by circumstance or whatever. And, you know, it's been interpreted into divine choices.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's like, if I'm going to like there's going to be a judgment day on my hair, right? I'm going to cut it off, all of it.
So the hair better obey or die.
That's right. So, but it's like every single hair on my head can be like, oh my God, one day we're going to die. So we better do what he wants. Better look awesome all the time. But that's not to say that like some of those hairs are going to fall out before I cut them off.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't make that choice.
Right.
But I am determining when the day is going to come that I'm actually going to cut it.
Yeah. And you can make one hair into a profit because you can tell it that day is coming.
But it's just like the comet, right? The doomsday is coming. The Earth will be hit again
Yeah.
by an object from space, which could create a mass extinction event. But that's not to say that some people are going to die before that happens.
Yeah.
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 So
Yeah.
the judgment day is not for them.
Right. I do think that it is a scary thing though, that like there's this idea because there's one thing about this rebirth cycle, right? That's pointing to a cycle. Just like you can look at a day or a year, you know, it's like suddenly it's dark. What happened?
Yeah,
the
yeah.
whole world is going crazy. Everything, like, where did the light go?
Yeah.
But you know that it's coming back the next day, right? And
Yeah.
it's because it's part of this astronomical spinning thing. Just like the year, you know, like if you didn't know that it's supposed to get cold at some point, you would kind of start freaking out and think the world is
Yeah.
ending, right?
Yeah.
But then
and you don't have the right clothes.
right. Like
not prepared.
Everything seems to be dying. All the leaves are gone. Like all the animals are gone. All the bugs have disappeared. Like, oh my God, the world is dying, right? You don't know the cycle.
Oh my gosh, I'm really trying to think about that. Ugh.
Right? But because we know it's part of this large cycle and that it's going around and around and around, everything going into the quote unquote death of winter, the sorrows of winter, is not nearly as bad because we know that it will come out of it again, right? So this birth, death, and rebirth cycle is one thing, but what he's pointing out is that a lot of these, the end of the world is a different thing than the cyclical destruction and rebirth.
Yes.
But my point is that the warning in there is just like, hey, man, you better have a jacket. You know,
Right.
It's going to get cold.
Yeah.
If you don't have a jacket, you're going to die.
Right. Yeah. That's a good point.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then that gets quant stuffed, or somebody for power turns it into like
Exactly.
the end of the world.
Exactly.
That's all I was going to say, was the distinction is not that all of these myths and traditions warning of the destruction and the things we need to do to not die, those aren't all bad.
Right.
But people can use them for evil. It's like it's the same concept we talk about with a quote unquote weapon.
Yeah.
You know, you can make a hammer, and the hammer is neither good nor bad.
Right.
But you can use it for evil.
Yes.
But you can also build a house. You know.
Yeah.
Yes.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a tool, and like it can be. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So where was I at here? Okay. Many end of the world teachings take the philosophy expressed in the Phoenix myth and apply it to the entire human race. When they do so, they often express the notion that human societies must endure continuous ordeals by fire as part of a God's great plan. Most apocalypses then veer from standard Phoenix allegory by proclaiming that this process will culminate in a great final battle followed by a utopia. These beliefs encourage people to tolerate and even welcome a world of unremitting physical hardship, conflict, and death, the kind of world that ancient writings say custodians wished their work race to live in. So that's one of the connections he keeps making, is he's looking back at these ancient texts and he's saying, look, this is what they said they wanted to happen. And then he's looking at these later religious practices or ideas and saying, this is a continuation of that desire expressed by these ancient beings. Okay, so I think that's one of the connections he's making there.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. So Judgment Day prophecies even spur some people into working to bring about a final battle because those believers think that it will mean the dawn of a utopia.
Especially if they believe they're one of the chosen ones.
Yeah.
Oh man.
End of the world teachings were widely disseminated in Persia sometime between 750 BC and 550 BC by a famous Persian prophet named Zoroaster. Zoroaster is cited by historians as one of the earliest prophets to preach the type of monotheism first created by Akhenaten. Okay, and there's a footnote here. Zoroaster probably lived closer to 550 BC than to 750 BC, although there is debate on this issue. Traditionally, he has been placed 258 years, quote-unquote, before Alexander, which some scholars interpret as 258 years before Alexander the Great destroyed the first Persian Empire in 330 BC. Zoroaster is also known as Zarathustra, a name that provided inspiration for a famous symphonic work composed by Richard Strauss entitled Thus Spake Zarathustra. Strauss's composition became the theme song of the American motion picture 2001: A Space Odyssey. Oh. So that that is Thus Spake Zarathustra.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's
Makes
cool.
him Ahura Mazda most happy. Okay, so Zoroaster was an Aryan mystic and priest who taught a form of Aryanism. Persia at that time was an Aryan nation dominated by an Aryan priest caste. Some Brotherhood branches today state that Zoroaster was an emissary of the ancient Brotherhood. Zoroaster's cosmology, or theory of the universe, was based on the concept of a struggle between good and evil. Zoroaster said that this struggle was to take place over a period of 12,000 years divided into 4 stages. Doesn't this sound familiar here? The first stage consisted solely of spiritual existence, during which time a chief god designed the physical universe. During the second stage, the material universe was created, followed by the entrance of the chief god's opponent, into the new universe for the purpose of creating problems. The third phase consisted of a battle between the chief god and his rivals over the fate of the many souls who came to occupy the universe. In the fourth and final stage, the chief god was to send in a succession of saviors who would finally defeat the opponent and bring salvation to all spiritual beings in the universe. And according to Zoroaster's model, the world is in the fourth stage. And I guess it has been since 350 BC or whatever. Because that's when he was teaching it. Zoroaster appears to have been a sincere and honest reformer. He taught some good lessons about the nature of ethics and its importance to spiritual salvation. He stressed that people have free will. In other matters, however, Zoroaster's religion fell well short of ideal. To understand why, we need only look at Zoroaster's god. The god of Zoroaster was named Ahura Mazda, which means Lord or Spirit, Ahura, of knowledge or wisdom, Mazda. Zoroaster states that when he was a 30-year-old priest, Ahura Mazda had appeared before him saying that he, Ahura Mazda, was the one true God. Ahura Mazda then proceeded to impart to Zoroaster many of the teachings which constituted Zoroastrianism. When we looked to see what sort of a creature Ahura Mazda was, we discovered good evidence that he was but another custodian pretending to be God. Ahura Mazda is depicted in some places as a bearded human who stands in a stylized circular object. From the circular object protrude two stylized wings to indicate that it flies, and the round flying object has two jutting struts underneath that resemble legs for landing. In other words, Ahura Mazda was a human-like god who flew in a round flying object with landing pads, a custodian. The implication is that Zoroaster's monotheism, with its apocalyptic message, was spread in Persia with custodial assistance, much in the same way that Judaism had been spread under Moses. As noted earlier, Zoroaster was an Aryan living in a region ruled by other Aryans. Aryan domination was so strong that the name of Persia was eventually changed to Iran, which is a derivative of the word Aryan. Zoroastrian works speak of a god fighting for the Aryan nations and helping them bring about good crops. Through its writings, primarily the Zend-Avesta, and through its secret mystical teachings, Zoroastrianism did much to spread philosophies of Aryanism to other organizations within the Brotherhood network, of which we shall see examples later. So, as year 1 AD approached, the Hebrew religion had become well settled in the Middle East. It was, however, undergoing many changes, some of which were caused by the extension of the Roman Empire into Palestine. The Romans, who had themselves been driven to conquest by strange mystical religions with definite brotherhood undertones, often made life difficult for the Jews. In this milieu, a number of Jewish sects arose which were often at odds with one another, except in regard to one matter: the Romans were not welcome in Palestine. Some Hebrew sects, such as the Sadducees, proclaimed the coming of a Messiah from God, a Messiah who would prevail in the eternal struggle of good and evil and bring freedom to the oppressed Jews. This idea became quite popular among the Hebrews of Palestine, even though its strong political slant made it dangerous. Old Testament Messianic prophecies began as early as 750 BC with the prophet of Isaiah. Jewish apocalypses appeared sporadically after that, yet often enough to keep fear of a world cataclysm alive. Examples include Prophet Joel circa 400 BC and Daniel circa 165 BC. Ironically, the prophecies were quite dire and expressed tremendous hostility against the Jewish people themselves, even though the Hebrews were meant to ultimately benefit from the prophecies. Old Testament seers described the people of Israel as wicked and sinful. They quoted Jehovah threatening all manner of calamities against the people of Israel and against the oppressors of Israel. No one was to be spared. To give the flavor of these predictions, here is a quote from the last book of the Old Testament written shortly before 445 BC. Okay, so this is from Malachi, the last book of the Old Testament. For look, the day comes that all will burn like an oven, and all the proud, and all those who act wickedly shall be stubble. And the day that comes shall burn them up, said the Lord of hosts, that it shall leave them neither root nor branch. But to you who fear my name shall the Son of Righteousness arise with healing in his wings, and you shall go forth and grow up as calves of the stall. And you will tread down the wicked, for they shall be ashes under the soles of your feet on the day that I shall do this, said the Lord of hosts. Remember the law of Moses my servant, which I commanded to him in Horeb for all of Israel, with the statutes and judgments. Observe, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. And he will turn the heart of the fathers to the children, and the heart of the children to their fathers, so that I do not come and destroy the earth with a curse. Malachi chapter 4. The above passage preaches the coming of a special messenger from God named Elijah, who is the Hebrews' competition against Messiah of the Buddhist religion. The Buddhists, perhaps sensing the one-upmanship or falling prey to corrupted Brotherhood influences, reshaped the Messiah legend to resemble monotheistic apocalypses. This created the illusion that the Hebrews and Buddhists were waiting for the same person, when in fact they were not. Brotherhood monotheists were and still are waiting for a messenger from God coupled with a day of judgment. The Buddhists were simply awaiting for a friend who is smart and caring enough to finish Buddha's work without the necessity of the entire world ending. Modern Hebrews are still waiting for Elijah to appear, while Christians believe that Elijah was John the Baptist, the man who baptized Jesus Christ. Old Testament prophets expressed another important idea. Jehovah would continue to manipulate people into war. And here's a quote. For I, God, will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle. Then shall the Lord go forth and fight against those nations. Zechariah 14. Some of these I want to read in like my Samuel L. Jackson voice. Right? Well, you will know my name is the Lord.
Yes.
When I rain my vengeance upon thee. Right? You gotta shout that shit.
I just wanted to point out too that you've made this point before about how you can imagine that a group of people who survived a global cataclysm, like, you know,
Would have survivor's
the
guilt.
survivor's guilt
Yeah.
of that can make them think, well, maybe we were like
Somehow more righteous.
Yeah, they were evil or something,
Yeah.
and they were destroyed because they must not have been good. Like God chose to wipe them out.
Right.
So that
Survivor's guilt is a known and powerful thing. And if you thought that you were one of the few survivors of the entire world, that guilt would be so enormous that it would be
the tendency to think that there was
think that there's some other reason.
Yeah.
To get rid of that
Yeah.
guilt, you say they must have been evil. The proof that they were evil is that they were destroyed.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then on the other side is like just from observing things or looking at things in modern history, whenever there's like a calamity, people will use that to gain power to themselves,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
they use this crisis to say, hey, you like
Yeah.
this was done because people were incompetent and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And so it could be the same thing. Like the whole world is destroyed and somebody's like, because you don't obey me, you'll be like those people.
Yep.
Hey, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
What would you guys do if you were the guy that the custodial god came down to talk to?
What's going on, custodian?
I'm wise to your tricks, Longhead.
Like, what do you do if you're
I mean,
that guy?
I don't know.
I've been sitting over here trying to run it through a few scenarios, and I'm thinking, well, maybe he could just kill you right away, and you sense that, and you're like, no, I need to go with it. I need to get a message to my family.
Well, I
Shit's
think
about to go down.
I think the idea is they pick what they do is they know
I thought that too.
they know that they're going to trick you before they start, or
Yeah.
else they won't pick you, right?
Yeah, and I did think that could be in a situation too.
So they like if they were choosing me or
but
Kyle,
wouldn't that be something? You're just walking around and boom.
yeah,
There
they
he is.
choose one of us, and they would choose to do it in such a way that they would know it would work.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe you get suspicious after a while.
Yeah.
You know, and some of these Jehovah followers seem to be that they're like, "What are you talking about, guy?" Like like Kyle was pointing out in maybe it was the part 1 about Abraham trying to talk God down.
Yeah, he was like God's wrestling partner.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, whoa,
Yeah.
dude.
He wrestled with God all night.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's really saying, like, dude, you came to me. I've been doing, like, a pretty good job, okay?
Yeah.
Like, give me a break. Like,
Yeah,
work
or
with
the
me
whole
here.
like destroy, with Lot in the city. He's like, don't destroy. You don't have to kill everybody, guy. Come on, what if
Yeah.
there's good people in there,
Yeah.
right? So some people seem to get why. And then what was the
I'm totally with you.
Jonah?
It's the good. It's-
Jonah's like, F this, right? And tries to escape.
It's the good Kyle's talking about. It's always been in there trying to fight.
Okay. So Bible believers still think that a supreme being is behind the vicious Machiavellian intentions described in the Bible. The ancient astronauts theory seems to provide a true breakthrough by pointing to a brutal technological society, not a supreme being, as the more likely source of such machinations. As we shall see in this book, there have been many end-of-the-world episodes in world history. They have all fulfilled the religious prophecies except on one very crucial point. Not one of them brought about a new era of peace and salvation as promised. Despite that dismal record, many people today are preaching that yet one more end of the world or final battle is about to make life better. Shortly before the year 1 AD, a controversial religious leader was born who tried to prevent himself from being declared an apocalyptic Messiah. He was unsuccessful and would be nailed to a cross as a result. We know him today as Jesus Christ, and his story is an important one. So, chapter 12, the Jesus ministry. The story most people know of Jesus is told in the New Testament. The New Testament, like much of the Old Testament, is in many places a greatly altered version of the original accounts on which it is based. In addition, probably less than 5% of all that Jesus and his original followers taught is found in the Bible. Many of the changes and deletions to the New Testament were made by special church councils. The editing process began as early as 325 AD during the First Council of Nicaea and continued well into the 12th century. For example, the Second Synod, which is a church council of Constantinople in 553 AD, deleted from the Bible Jesus' references to reincarnation, an important concept to Jesus and his early followers. Later, the Lateran councils of the 12th century added a tenet to the Bible that was never taught by Jesus, the concept of the Holy Trinity. The Christian church did not limit itself to changing a few ideas, it also rejected entire books. The church destroyed many documents and records which contradicted the radical changes that were made to Christian doctrine by these councils. Fortunately, the original writings which survived the editing process still offer valuable clues and insights into the life of Jesus. Many writings rejected by the church councils found their way into a book known as the Apocrypha, or hidden writings. The Apocrypha consists of writings which were adjudged to be of dubious origin or quality by the church. Some of this material was rightfully rejected. Other apocryphal works, however, were omitted simply because they contradicted the official church version of Jesus' life on several crucial details. These are details which, if carefully researched, would offer a somewhat different outlook on the life of Jesus from the one presented in the authorized Bible. According to the Apocrypha, the story of Jesus begins with his maternal grandparents, Joachim and Anna. Joachim was said to be a priest of a Hebrew temple. He and Anna were happily married, except for one problem: they had not been able to produce any children, and this was a source of considerable embarrassment to them. Bearing children, especially sons, was quite important in that era. One day, Joachim was standing alone in the fields when an angel appeared. The angel was described as giving off a tremendous amount of light and striking fear into Joachim by its appearance. The angel called Joachim and told him not to be ashamed any longer because an angel would cause Anna to become pregnant. The only stipulation for this honor was that Joachim and his wife must surrender their child to be raised by the priests and angels at a temple in Jerusalem. So this is talking about the birth of Mary.
And when I was doing a little bit of a deep dive into rituals, there was this one, I think it was an African country, that they performed a ritual for the female when she would go to marry into the husband's family. The anxiety that she would experience from having to leave the allegiance of her mother and move into the role of needing to produce, and then they would perform this ritual to kind of ease her anxiety so that she could not be infertile, so that she could produce.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Huh.
Yeah. So there you go. Was that my first halfway news story?
That's cool, yeah. So it says Mary was not free to pick her own husband. He tells the story of so Mary is born, right? So Joachim and Anna do give birth to a girl, and they call her Mary, and then she was taken to the temple and left there. Okay. So Mary was not free to pick her own husband. Her mentors chose one for her. The mate picked for Mary was a very old man by the name of Joseph. Joseph did not agree at first to the marriage because he was quite old and already had children of his own. After efforts were made to change his mind, Joseph consented to the match and went to his home in Bethlehem to prepare his house for his new wife. Mary went to the home of her parents, Joachim and Anna, in Galilee to make herself ready. While Mary was in Galilee, an angel named Gabriel appeared before her, announcing that she would give birth to the new Messiah. And Mary was confused. Quote, she said, "How can that be? Foreseeing, according to my vow of chastity, I have never had contact with any man. How can I bear a child without the addition of a man's seed?" To this the angel replied and said, "Think not, Mary, that you will conceive in the ordinary way. For without sleeping with a man while a virgin, you will conceive, and while a virgin you will give milk from your breast. For the Holy Ghost will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you without any of the heats of lust. So that to which you will give birth will be only holy, because it is only conceived without sin, and being born shall be called the Son of God." And then Mary, stretching forth her hands and lifting her eyes to heaven, said, "Take notice of the handmaid of the Lord, and let it be done to me what you have said." This is in the apocryphal text. Okay. So we're going into the virgin birth idea here.
Yeah, I've wanted to know more about what you think about.
But what he's cluing us
weird
in on is
pregnancy
that this
stories.
also happens to her parents. The idea this is the key here. So we'll get into that in the next segment. We can take a break.
All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the final hour and a half of the Brothers of the Serpent podcast. Fastest 2.5 hours in podcasting.
Literally fastest.
Yeah.
All right.
Laura's experiencing the speed up of time.
Yes, I am. I really am.
Okay, so virgin births, Gods of Eden, William Bramley. Virgin birth means only that the woman did not become impregnated by a man, but was caused instead to bear a child through the action of an angel. If we consider that many New Testament angels are custodians, artificial insemination becomes a distinct possibility. The above conversation between Mary and her angel expresses a strong moral and spiritual belief connected to the act of conception. Impregnation by an angel was deemed holy and desirable, but conception by human means was considered sin. To someone engaging in artificial insemination, there would be a practical reason for creating such a distinction. Artificial insemination helps guarantee control over the physical characteristics of a future baby, something that cannot be assured in random human mating. And yeah, what he's talking about is this part where it says, "So that to which you will give birth will be only holy, because it is conceived without sin, and being born shall be called the Son of God." Like, conceived without sin, right? Sin being what? The sexual act?
Yeah.
The implications there are...
Yeah. I see exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. By artificially inseminating 2 or more generations in a row, the purity of the final product is greatly increased. This is practiced today by animal breeders who closely control the insemination and breeding of livestock from generation to generation in order to bring forth bigger, better, and purer animals. In this respect, it is significant that the human offspring of the alleged virgin births were often described as physically unflawed and unusually beautiful in appearance. While some of this flattery was no doubt due to the tendency of followers to view their religious leaders in the best possible light, the stories of angel-induced pregnancies over consecutive generations, such as the tale surrounding Jesus, would strongly suggest a breeding effort. This discussion is not meant to cast disrespect on the personality of Jesus by suggesting that his body was bred like a cow, but that is the picture which emerges. The disdain expressed to priests by biblical angels for the human method of conception was apparently based upon mere practical concerns to ensure good breeding, but it was nevertheless taken to heart by early priests and became a major element of many monotheistic religions. In biblical days, human beings were also heavily propagandized as very sinful to justify the barbaric treatment humans suffered at the hands of their custodial God and angels. By extending this concept of sinfulness to the human method of procreation, every person conceived through human sexual intercourse was to be considered born in sin and therefore spiritually condemned. And what a frightful dilemma this created.
Wow.
Every time a man and woman conceived and gave birth to a child, they had condemned a spiritual being. Yet the human drives which produce children are strong. The religious teaching of automatic spiritual condemnation because of human procreation generated a powerful conflict between the drive for spiritual freedom and the physical drive to reproduce. And the result was intense anxiety on the subject of sex. These teachings had another important effect. They helped reduce human resistance to engaging in war. It is easier for a religious person to kill someone if he believes that the victim is inherently sinful. Fortunately, most people today no longer believe that human conception is innately sinful, including most clergy. If anything, giving birth to children is seen as an event of happiness, and that is as it should be. So, after Mary's experience with the angel, Joseph traveled from his home in Bethlehem to pick up Mary in Galilee. And Joseph discovered that his young bride was already several months pregnant. Thinking that Mary had become a whore, Joseph made preparations to abandon her. An angel intervened and convinced Joseph that Mary was still a virgin. Joseph stayed with Mary in Galilee until her 9th month of pregnancy. And in the 9th month, Joseph and Mary set off for Joseph's home in Bethlehem to have the child there. According to the Apocrypha, the couple did not reach Joseph's home in time. Mary went into labor near the outskirts of Bethlehem, and a shelter had to be located for her immediately. And what they found was a cave, and in that cave, young Jesus was born. Quote, "And when they came by the cave, Mary confessed to Joseph that her time of giving birth had come, and she could not go on to the city, and said, 'Let us go into this cave.' At that time, the sun was nearly down. But Joseph hurried away so that he might fetch her a midwife. And when he saw an old Hebrew woman who was from Jerusalem, he said to her, 'Please come here, good woman, and go into that cave, and you will see a woman just ready to give birth.' It was after sunset when the old woman and Joseph reached the cave, and they both went into it. And look, it was filled with light, greater than the light of lamps and candle, and greater than the light of the sun itself. The infant was wrapped in swaddling clothes and sucking the breast of his mother, Mary." That's also from the apocryphal text. The unusual lights in the cave indicates to some people that the existence of high-tech lighting of some sort. This may not be surprising when we discover that other apparent high-tech phenomena surrounded the birth of Jesus, such as the so-called Star of Bethlehem. Nearly everyone in the Christian world knows the tale of the 3 wise men who followed a bright star to the baby Jesus in Bethlehem. Most Christians believe that this unusual star, known as the Star of Bethlehem, was supernatural in origin, a creation of God. Some scientists, if they have not dismissed the story as a religious myth, believe the star to have been Halley's Comet, making a low pass over Earth, or a rare alignment of Venus and a bright star. Several UFO writers, on the other hand, assert that the Star of Bethlehem was an aircraft which led the 3 wise men from their homes in Persia to Bethlehem in the same fashion that Moses and the Hebrew tribes had been guided by an airborne Jehovah earlier in history. Surprisingly, the Apocrypha itself best supports the UFO theory. An apocryphal book quotes one of the 3 wise men, quote, "We saw an extraordinarily large star shining among the stars of heaven, and so outshined all the other stars that they became not visible." Unquote. So this rules out Halley's Comet, which has never been so bright. An alignment of Venus and stars could not blot out all the other stars in the above fashion. Not only did the Star of Bethlehem overwhelm other stars, it moved. Quote, "So the wise men began their travel, and look, the star, which they saw in the east, went before them until it came and stood over the cave where the young child was with Mary, his mother." Unquote. After leading the 3 wise men to Jesus' birthplace, this remarkably intelligent star accompanied them home again. Quote, "The light of which they followed until they returned to their own country." Unquote. The preceding passages offer additional evidence of custodial involvement in the breeding and birth of Jesus. Who, then, were the 3 wise men? They are generally said to have been mystics and astrologers. Clearly, they were indoctrinated in the Brotherhood Messiah prophecies, else they would not have made the journey. Significantly, they hailed from Persia, a stronghold of Zoroastrianism and Arianism at the time. Many Christians believe that Jesus was born in an animal stall inside of Bethlehem City. In fact, it says so in the New Testament's book of Luke. Proponents of the cave birth story, however, state that Jesus was not taken to the stall until several days after he was born. Mary had reportedly hidden Jesus there because of the threat to his life from King Herod, a local monarch who was alarmed by the Hebrew Messiah prophecies. If it is true that Jesus was born in a cave, why would the writer of Luke and other early church leaders claim that Jesus' first bed was in a manger? It was the intention of those who backed Jesus to proclaim him the Hebrew Messiah. For that assertion to be true, they needed to prove that Jesus was a direct descendant of Hebrew King David. Such a lineage was required by the Hebrew prophecies. A number of religious historians, however, have concluded that Jesus belonged to a Hebrew religious sect known as the Essenes. Joachim, Anna, and Mary may have all been members of Essene temples. The cave birth would tend to reinforce that conclusion because the Essenes were well known for using caves as shelters and hospices. If Jesus was an Essene, he could not have been a descendant of King David. And this is why. The Essenes were outwardly Jewish, but they also studied the Zendavesta of Zoroastrian religions and reportedly practiced Arianism. This would help explain the visit of the 3 Persian wise men to baby Jesus in Bethlehem. It further appears that being Aryan was a requirement to becoming an Essene. Jesus himself was white-skinned and red-headed. Because of the racial prerequisite to becoming an Essene, no true Essene could have been a direct descendant of King David because the Hebrew tribes had a different lineage. Much of what we know today about the Essenes comes from a famous mid-20th century archaeological discovery, the Dead Sea Scrolls. The scrolls are a library of very old documents dating from the 1st century AD. They were written by members of an Essene community and hidden by them in caves near the Dead Sea. The scrolls were discovered in 1947 or possibly 1945 by a young Bedouin tribesman. According to historian John Allegro, who analyzes the scrolls in his book, The People of the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Essenes had many characteristics of a secret society. For example, a person's admission into the Essene order was accomplished only after several years' probation. The Essenes practiced initiation rituals in which they swore to never divulge their secret teachings. They also held confidential the names of the angels said to be living among the Essenes in their closed communities. Essene priests often called themselves the sons of Zadok, after High Priest Zadok, who had served in the Temple of Solomon.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
I just was reading what one of Jesus was the maverick custodian.
Yeah.
Did you read that already?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I missed it.
He got way ahead of us with that. That's what I'm saying. We were going to get to the Jesus stuff. But yeah, he wrote that before we got to the Jesus stuff. So despite the strong evidence, some theologians still dispute that Jesus was an Essene. Their objections are based primarily on the fact that many of Jesus' teachings contradicted Essene ways. There was a good reason for that contradiction. Jesus, though an Essene, had come into contact with the Indian maverick movement, and as a result, had become a rebellious maverick himself. He tried to forge ahead with a religious philosophy which was often at odds with his Essene sponsors, and he would suffer for it. In both the New Testament and the Apocrypha, the life of Jesus seems to be fairly well covered up until about the age of 5 or 6. Then, abruptly, there is a complete void of information about where Jesus went or what he did. We find in the New Testament one episode of Jesus appearing before Hebrew scholars at the age of 12, followed by an 18-year silence in which Jesus' activities are unaccounted for. Suddenly, at the age of 30, Jesus reemerges and launches his short and tumultuous religious career. Where had he gone, and what had he done during the unknown years?
Yeah, I want to know.
Several years ago, I happened to see an intriguing film documentary by Richard Bach entitled The Lost Years. This film regularly shows up on local American television stations around Christmas and Easter. It is well worth watching. The film suggests that Jesus journeyed to Asia, where he spent his teens and early adulthood studying the religions practiced there. One source from which the filmmaker drew this remarkable conclusion was the Legend of Issa, a very old Buddhist document purportedly discovered in the Hemi Monastery of India by Russian traveler Nicholas Notovich in 1887. Notovich published his translation of the Buddhist legend in 1890 in his book The Unknown Life of Jesus. According to the Buddhist legend uncovered by Notovich, a remarkable young man named Issa had departed for Asia at the age of 13. He studied under several religious masters of the East, did some preaching of his own, and returned to Palestine 16 years later at the age of 29. If Jesus was an Essene and he had traveled to Asia under Essene sponsorship, and if the Essenes indeed followed an Aryan tradition, we would expect Jesus to be sent to study under the Aryan Brahmins of the Indian subcontinent. According to the legend of Issa, that is precisely what happened. Quote, in his 14th year, young Issa, the Blessed One, came this side of the Sindh and settled among the Aryans. So that's a province in western Pakistan. Unquote. Upon Jesus' arrival, the white priests of Brahma welcomed him joyfully and taught him, among other things, to read and understand the Vedas and to teach and expound sacred Hindu scriptures. This joyful reception quickly turned sour, however, because Jesus insisted upon associating with the lower castes. That led to friction between the young, headstrong Jesus and his Brahmin hosts. According to the legend, quote, but the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas, members of the military caste, told him that they were forbidden by the great Para Brahma, the Hindu god, to come near to those who were created from his belly and his feet, which is the mythical origin of the lower castes. That the Vaisyas, members of the merchant and agricultural caste, might only hear the recital of the Vedas, and this only on the festival days, and that the Sudras, one of the lower castes, were not only forbidden to attend the reading of the Vedas, but forbidden to even look upon them, for they were condemned to perpetual servitude as slaves of the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, and even the Vaisyas. But Issa, disregarding their words, remained with the Sudras, preaching against the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas. I mean, that sounds like Jesus used to, upset the Pharisees or whatever, like by hanging out with the
riffraff.
The riffraff and the dock workers and shit. Yeah. Issa declared strongly against man's arrogating to himself the authority to deprive his fellow beings of their human and spiritual rights. Verily, he said, God has made no difference between his children, who are all alike dear to him. Issa denied the divine inspiration of the Vedas and the Puranas. Unquote. The white priests and warriors were so angered that they sent servants to murder Issa. Warned of the danger, he fled the holy city by night and escaped into the Buddhist country. There he learned the Pali language and studied sacred Buddhist writings or sutras. After 6 years, Jesus, quote, could perfectly expound the sacred Buddhist scrolls, unquote. The Issa legend has some remarkable implications. It portrays Jesus as a sincere religious reformer who found himself turning against the custodial Aryan traditions in which he had been raised. His sympathies went instead to the maverick Buddhists. The Buddhist influence in Jesus' teachings are evident in the Bible, as in Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, which contains some philosophy strikingly similar to the Buddhism of his day. After 15 years or so in and about Asia, Jesus traveled back to Palestine via Persia, Greece, and Egypt. According to one tradition, Jesus was initiated into the higher ranks of the Brotherhood in the Egyptian city of Heliopolis. After completing that initiation, he returned to Palestine, now a man of 29 or 30. And immediately upon his return, he embarked upon his public ministry. The rift between Jesus and his Aryan hosts in India did not at first seem to adversely affect Jesus' relationship to the Essene order. It did not take long, however, for trouble to erupt. Jesus did not share the asceticism. I don't know what this word is. Ascetism? I think he's talking about ascetics of his Essene brothers, and downplayed the importance of ritualism for achieving spiritual salvation. Jesus was surrounded by Essene sponsors who strongly believed in the coming of a Messiah, and they were determined to have their investment. Jesus proclaimed that new Messiah, and Jesus forbade them to do so. According to historian Will Durant, Jesus, quote, repudiated all claim to Davidic descent, unquote, and for a long time, quote, forbade the disciples to call him the Messiah, unquote. Most historians attribute those actions to the political climate of the time. Palestine was under Roman occupation, and the Romans took a dim view of the Hebrew prophecies because of their political overtones. The historians think Jesus did not wish to run afoul of the Romans. Jesus never had time to establish his maverick religious system because some of his Essene backers, and according to the Bible, even some custodial angels, quickly got him into trouble by proclaiming him the Messiah. It did not take the Romans and some Hebrew leaders long to arrest Jesus and put him on trial. The Hebrews objected to his unorthodox religious ideas, and the Romans to his alleged political pretensions. A mere 3 years after beginning his ministry, Jesus was reportedly nailed to a cross. Although there is evidence that Jesus did not die on the cross but survived to live out the rest of his life in seclusion, the crucifixion ended his public ministry and paved the way for his name to be used to implant the very Judgment Day philosophies he had opposed. Okay, so there's a footnote here. A set of documents dating from around 400 AD, the Nag Hammadi scrolls, were discovered in Egypt in 1945. The scrolls are hand-inscribed copies of earlier original manuscripts. Many or all of those originals were written no later than 150 AD, i.e. before the standard New Testament Gospels were penned. Some scholars believe many of the Nag Hammadi scrolls to be as authentic and less altered than the accepted Gospels of the New Testament. According to the Nag Hammadi, Jesus was not nailed to a cross, but another man, Simon, had been cleverly substituted to suffer Jesus' fate. Whatever the truth of this might be, what is important to us is simply that the crucifixion signaled the end of Jesus' public ministry. Okay. Although Jesus had a large enough following to invite attention, he did not preach long enough to enter the history books of his own time. His fame grew after the crucifixion when his disciples traveled far and wide to establish their new apocalyptic sect. With the continued help of their custodial angels, Christian missionaries made Jesus a household name and created a powerful new faction that would further divide human beings into battling groups. The successful effort to make Jesus the figurehead of a new Judgment Day religion brought about the most famous apocalyptic writing in the Western world, the Revelation of St. John. This work, which is also known as the Book of Revelation or the Apocalypse, is the last book of the New Testament. It leaves Christians with the same type of dire prophecies that the Hebrews had been left with at the end of the Old Testament, the coming of a great global catastrophe followed by a day of judgment. The Book of Revelation is well worth taking a closer look at.
So again, I mean, this, like, is this good or bad? This is, once again, like the idea that we've talked about this many times, that this way of making these stories that end up being repeated over and over and over again for thousands of years, and there's hidden knowledge inside them, is a sort of technology. We've discussed it as a technology.
Yeah.
It's a technology to preserve certain knowledge, and, you know, it's a story that people somehow is designed in such a way that people want to repeat it and tell it, so that it stays, so that it sticks around, right? And you have this apocalyptic end, which is true. Ultimately, there's going to be one.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like,
you can twist it however you want.
Yeah.
Through the rituals,
Once again,
through the years, through what, you know.
I think what he, multiple times he points out that the problem with the whole apocalyptic end of the world thing is that it's going to be followed by a utopia, which never happens.
Right. But that's part of the rebirth thing, and I understand that.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
And everyone who doesn't believe is going to burn in fire, and everyone who does believe is going to be, you know, totally fine and live in this utopia for thousands of years.
But again, you could interpret that in a way, like if you wanted to look at it like, well, we should be, you know, we should be watching the skies. Yeah, we should be preppers. We should. I'm kind of sticking with this theme that, like, yes, I agree with all this stuff happens, and it looks like people utilize the story for certain purposes, right? But there's both good and bad intentions.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
In the creation and utilization of this story.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I also think it's interesting how he points out that, like, these apocalyptic tales show up every couple of 100 years. There's a different one, right? And then there's a new one. Like he was saying in the Old Testament, first you started with Isaiah, and then you had whoever, and then there was somebody else. And it was like, you know, then you end up with Daniel, right? And when you look at the dates, you know, if every 200-300 years or so, there's a new guy that comes along and says, trust me, this is totally about to happen. Right?
Yeah.
And basically reiterates the whole thing. Keeps it alive.
Yeah, and we've talked about it. So there seems to be this sort of injection of something, knowledge, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it could be, these two factions of the quote-unquote Brotherhood,
Right.
the good and bad, trying to inject, a retelling of the story in such a way,
Yeah. And of course, Bramley is looking at it from this idea of like we're dealing with a technologically advanced something that's kind of in the background manipulating
God
all this
Gambit,
stuff. Yeah.
Gambit.
Yeah. And so that comes into what we're going to chapter 13 here, the Apocalypse of St. John.
Yeah, that's
And,
it.
Yeah, and he goes into that like the idea of this apocalypse and how it happens, and when he goes through the reading of the book, you're just like, okay, yeah, that is just like all the rest of it. You're like, yeah, that is strange now that you pointed out, right?
Yeah. Let's hear it.
So, the alleged author of Revelation was Jesus' personal friend and disciple John, not to be confused with John the Baptist, who was a different person. John appears to have been the most influential of Jesus's disciples, and an earlier biblical text that is attributed to him, the Book of John, seems to come closest to conveying the strong mystical leanings of Jesus's backers and of the early Christian church. The Revelation of St. John is the fifth and final work attributed to John to appear in the New Testament. Some scholars believe that Revelation was written by John while he was living in exile on the Greek island of Patmos, many years after the crucifixion of Christ. Others are convinced that disciple John was not the author of Revelation because Revelation was not discovered until about 200 years after John's lifetime. According to Joseph Free, writing in his book Archaeology and Bible History, the linguistic qualities of Revelation are inferior in some ways to the Book of John. It is argued that if Revelation was written 5 years after the Book of John by the same person, Revelation should be linguistically equal or superior to the earlier work. I'm not sure I buy that. A lot can happen to a guy in 5 years. And if you're in prison or whatever.
Takes practice, yeah.
I'm just saying, if you're in prison, and what does it have to be linguistically superior? Do you have to get better at writing over time? Or maybe a whole.
Well, that's what I was saying. It takes practice. I mean, if you stop doing it, you're not going to get any better.
Right.
And you can most likely you're going to get worse.
Yeah. Another point is that the Revelation contains expressions from the Hebrew language that were not used in John's earlier writings. On the other hand, important similarities between Revelation and other books of John have been noted, especially in the repetition of certain words and phrases. Whatever the true authorship of Revelation may be, the impact of this work has been major. Revelation is the first-person account of the author's bizarre meeting with a strange person that he believed to be Jesus. Over a period of a day or two, the author also met a number of unusual creatures, which showed him pictures of frightening future events. The author was told by those creatures that Satan or the Antichrist would take over the world. This would be followed by the final battle of Armageddon, during which the angels of God would battle the forces of Satan. The final battle would bring about the banishment of Satan from human society and the triumphant return or second coming of Jesus to reign over earth for 1,000 years. The book of Revelation is written in a wonderfully picturesque manner. It is filled with complex and imaginative symbolism. Because the pictures revealed to John were symbols, Revelation can be used to predict an imminent end of the world at almost any historical epoch. The prophecy is constructed so that symbols can be interpreted to represent whatever historical events happen to be occurring at the time one is alive. This is precisely what has been done with the Revelation ever since it appeared, and it is still being done today. The question is, what caused the author's visions? Was it lunacy, a propensity to tell tall tales, or was it something else? The author seems sincere enough to rule out deceit. His straightforward manner of narration tends to eliminate lunacy as the answer. That leaves something else. The question is, what? John begins his story by telling us that he was at prayer. From a further description, it seems that he was conducting his ritual outdoors during daylight hours. Suddenly, a loud voice resounded behind him. The voice commanded him to write down everything he was about to see and hear, and to send the message to the 7 Christian churches in Asia. John turned about to see who was speaking to him, and lo and behold, there he saw what he believed to be 7 golden candlesticks. Standing among the candlesticks was a person whom the author described as, quote, one who looked like the Son of Man, Jesus, clothed with a garment down to his foot, and wearing about his chest a golden girdle. His head and hairs were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were as flame of fire. And his feet were like fine brass, as if they burned in a furnace. And his voice was as the sound of many waters. And he had in his right hand 7 stars, and out of his mouth went a sharp 2-edged sword, and his appearance was as the sun shines in his strength. And when I saw him, I fell at his feet as though dead, and he laid his right hand upon me. Revelation chapter 1.
Okay. It's a constellation.
Yeah. That's what I
The
was thinking,
candles
too.
are the broken up comet.
Yeah.
good
And they're the
call.
angels of God that come down and defeat the angels of Satan, which are just the rocks on the earth and stuff.
Oh, that's
I
good.
thought that too. I was like, I wonder if he's talking about a constellation.
Dude, so the 7 stars would be the Mithras, the Pleiades.
Yeah.
And next to the Pleiades or below the Pleiades is the character we were talking about with Matheson recently on the Zoom conference for
Ophiuchus?
No, it's for Contact at the Cabin.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what the name of the
Man, we would know so much
okay,
more
so-
if we got to go to the event. We would already be back. We would already be back from the event.
I'll have to dig it up.
We love
The
you,
feet
David
of brass
Matheson.
is a weird part, though.
But man, we gotta
As if they
ask
burned
him.
in his furnace, and his voice was as the sound of many waters.
We gotta ask Matheson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are striking similarities between this new Jesus and the space-age angels of earlier biblical stories. The prophet Ezekiel, for example, had also met visitors with feet of brass. So after John regained his composure, Jesus, and he puts Jesus in quotes here, he's like, this is not, it doesn't sound like Jesus at all. It doesn't look like him at all. White wool hair, eyes like fire, feet of brass. Like, come on.
Kind
Doesn't
of like a Gandalf character, possibly.
yeah. A wizard.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jesus commanded him to write down the missives that Jesus wanted sent to various Christian churches. Those letters constitute the first 3 chapters of Revelation. The most interesting phase of John's experience then begins in chapter 4. Quote, I looked, and behold, a door was opened in heaven, and the first voice which I heard, which sounded like a trumpet talking with me, said, Come, and I will show you the things that must take place hereafter. And immediately I was in the Spirit, and look, a throne was set in heaven, and one creature sat on the throne. And the one who sat looked to me like a jasper and sardine stone, and there was a rainbow all around the throne looking like an emerald. And all around the throne were 24 seats, and upon the seats I saw 24 elders, clothed in white garments, and they had upon their heads crowns of gold. And out of the throne came lightnings and thunderings and voices, and there were 7 lamps of fire burning before the throne, which are the 7 spirits of God. And before the throne there was a sea of glass like crystal, and in the midst of the throne and round about the throne were 4 beasts full of eyes in front and back. Revelation chapter 4. The presence of 7 candles and 7 lamps indicates that a ritual had been prepared for the author. The ritual was replete with costumes, theatrics, and sound effects, all designed to deeply impress the message upon the author. And this is what happened when John was shown the first scroll. Quote, And I saw in the right hand of the one who sat on the throne a scroll with writing on the inside, and on the backside sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, Who is worthy to open the book and to loosen the seals of it? And no man in heaven nor in earth, nor from under the earth. Under the earth? What? No man from under the earth was able to open the book nor look upon its contents. And I wept a great deal because no man was found worthy to open and read this book, nor to look upon it. And one of the elders said to me, Weep not, look, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has succeeded to open the book and to loosen the 7 seals. And I saw standing between the throne and the 4 beasts, and in the midst of the elders a lamb in the matter of having been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God, sent out to all the earth. And he came and took the book out of the right hand of the one who sat upon the throne. And when he had taken the book, the 4 beasts and 24 elders fell before the Lamb, each of them holding harps and golden containers full of odors, which are the prayers of saints. And they sung a new song, saying, You are worthy to take the book and to open the seals of it, for you were slain and have redeemed us to God by your blood from every family, language, people, and nation, and have made us into kings and priests to God, and we shall reign on earth. And I saw and I heard the voice of many angels around the throne and the beasts of the elders, and they numbered 10,000 times 10,000 and thousands of thousands, saying with a loud voice, Worthy is the Lamb that was slain to receive power and riches and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and blessing. And every creature which is in heaven and on the earth and under the earth, and those that are in the sea, and all that are in them, I heard I saying, Blessing and honor and glory and power be to him that sits upon the throne and to the Lamb forever and ever. And the 4 beasts said, Amen. And the 24 elders fell down and worshipped him that lived forever and ever. Revelation 5. It does sound like a ritual.
Mm-hmm. I'm just it's like I've got this idea of
stars.
Yes, stars in my mind. I'm just like, oh. I don't know.
Yeah, there are numbers. It's a 24.
Yeah.
And then there's thousands and countless. Yes, there's
Yeah.
a countless number of stars. And yeah, there are symbols in here. But I think he's pointing this out. Like, look at all the symbols in this.
Yeah.
You know. So it has been pointed out that the experience John described is identical to mystical ritual, especially of initiation into the teachings of a secret society. For this reason, some people believe that Revelation is actually an account of an initiation ceremony typical of many Brotherhood organizations, typical even today.
That's a good spot to leave off
Yeah.
on. End on.
Yep.
Very cool.
So what do you think? Was it space or aliens? Are we talking about stars here or a ritual?
I think it's always
the star-
multi-layered.
Yeah, the stars can be contained in ritual.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's, all
it's hard to
connected.
tell.
It's all connected. What do you think the under the earth?
Well, the thing that I thought of was that in some of the apocryphal texts,
Who lives under the earth? That's what I was thinking.
The legends of the Jews, Solomon
Yeah.
raises up this being from under the earth. These beings that live under the earth, and he comes up and he has 2 heads. It's like this really weird description of this being that he brings up to show. He's like trying to show somebody, like, does this weird thing,
look
and
what
this
I
guy
can do.
just like comes out of the earth.
Look at this nasty thing I can bring out of the
Yeah.
earth. Okay.
But I don't know. That was a really strange reference. But of course, in the story, it's just like, yeah, he's just one of those people that lives under the earth.
Right.
It's like got 2 heads. And
There have always been legends of beings that live beneath the earth. So
And can they only come out if someone kind of brings them out, or can they just
well,
pop out?
I mean, the legend of Saul. I don't know what the legend.
no, I
of
think
Solomon was.
he forced him out, and he couldn't go back,
Yeah.
or something like that in that story.
I mean, but these legends are everywhere. Like Native Americans some of them say that they were during the last destruction of the world. They were protected by beings that live beneath the earth, the ant people.
Do you remember if they called them out, or did they come out on their own?
No. Eventually
They came out on their own to help.
they came out and guided the people under the earth, where they lived for several generations until the destruction was over, and then they came back out. But the ant people stayed; they lived down there.
Okay, so it was like the underground revolution.
Revolution?
Like, I'm just thinking, who would be the people that would always be underground, coming up to be like, no, it's safe down here.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah,
Like they bailed on the whole situation up here.
yeah,
It's like,
and
we
they
could
were
be
just
safe
down there.
underground.
Yeah, and then they maybe come up. So maybe it was part of the revolution.
They were they were trying to help some people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're masters of the custodial arts.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Yeah, I think that was a good show.
Oh, yeah.
All right, you guys can get a hold of us, brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com. Go to the website, brothersoftheserpent.com. Check out the encyclopedia and the glossary and the SnakeSkins, which is our merchandise store. And help us out in the pyramid scheme. Join Patreon or give us one-time donations through PayPal. The links are there on the website.
And thank you so much to everyone who's done that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, very
thank
much
you so
appreciated.
Patreon's continuously growing.
It's amazing.
And give us reviews on the iTunes store. That really helps. Go to Apple Podcasts on the iTunes store and give the podcast reviews. That always helps. And I usually read the reviews on the show. So share the shows wherever you can. Follow us on Twitter at Snake Bros and No Vowels, SNKBRS. Join the Facebook group run by Jordan. Join the Discord chat. There's a link to that on the website. And check out the Library of the Serpent, which is also linked on the website. That's run by Jeff, who also runs the Discord. And History Shift, follow him on YouTube and on Twitter. He makes all of our YouTube videos. Pod Doodles, who takes our podcasts, some of them, and turns them into doodles that you can watch him draw while you listen to the podcast. It's really cool. And don't forget about Cosmographia, the podcast we do with Randall Carlson. We also have a subreddit, r/Brothers of the Serpent, so you can join there. And let's see, oh yeah, give us updates on Reddit.
Thank you for my shout outs.
Yeah, keep giving Laura shout outs. She's going to be in here for probably, I don't know, looking at the book now, 8 more shows.
Yeah, we're going to have
how many parts.
till we can hammer through this book.
Yeah. And thanks to Where Did the Road Go, Uncharted X, Mike and Maurice's Mind Escape, The C Word, Podcast, Grimerica, Conspiranormal, and The Cosmic Tusk. We love all you guys. We love all your listeners.
And thanks to the snake parents for watching the snakeling.
Right.
Yes.
The snakeling.
All snake parents that watch little baby snakes.
Snakelings.
For mama snakes. So she can come sit with the other snakes.
Yep, that's right.
Greatly appreciated.
Yeah, it is very much appreciated.
We love you guys.
Yep. And thank you, listeners, so much. We love that you guys are out there. This is our favorite time of the week. So thank
always
you
have.
guys. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like my favorite time of the week now, too.
Yeah, tell them to get back to work.
Get back to work.
Adamu. Dang it.